All right, folks, it's another edition of Mullins Music and Memories. I'm waiting for my good friend Ronnie Warner to be joining me in a little bit, and I know he's definitely from California and is going to have some great conversation with us. So I've already got my Talking Upstream guys here with me, and I'm looking forward to having my guests of honor join us, as well as some other people in the course of the conversation. But always glad to have these amazing gentlemen pop in and see what they've got going on. And of course, I'm a big fan, even if they have moved the date on me and everything of that nature. So I've got to tease them about that, but we're going to see about getting them in. And like I said, I'm also going to text Ronnie and see where he's at. He has the link and should be joining the conversation very shortly. But right now, I'm going to see what my good friends have got going on. So Zach, you're over there and having a good time. As I was just saying, I'm over there just kind of like seeing your shows every week, still enjoying watching them, but y'all move the date and the time on me, and I'm going like, I can't comment. I can't make comments like I used to because y'all have changed the day and the format on me. But I understood. I wanted to feel a little bit more interactive and all of that. So that being said, I definitely understood where you were coming from, but I was going like, daggone it, I can't comment.
Yeah, we definitely like the interactivity of it all. But the problem we were coming with doing it the same time every week was that some of the guests that we wanted to have on couldn't make those times. And like, getting a guest on for a show is pretty difficult. So we started kind of moving some of the times around. And then we decided that we couldn't do a live version anymore because we had like guests that had to kind of link up quickly. And then through a couple of mishaps, I had to have like a spine surgery not too long ago. So we had to kind of put some in the books so that they can come out at the right time. So yeah, we definitely miss having you on, at least in the back, kind of giving us some better ideas than what Dylan would give us. But we're trying to figure out the best way to make sure that everyone can comment and we can kind of come up with the coolest stories. But yeah, we definitely appreciate all the all the help that you gave us in the earlier shows.
No, and I enjoyed giving you that help. And maybe if y'all give me like an advance notice as what the theme is, I can still come up with some great ideas and y'all can throw them in there. Or maybe if they're not doing the same time as my show, I can figure out a way to engage with y'all and have those moments. Because like I said, I was really enjoying that as I even described y'all's show to Ronnie, and I'm going to text him and see where he's at and everything. But when I was having that conversation, he was definitely impressed with what y'all were doing, and he's been in Hollywood for a number of years. So like I said, when I mentioned the fact that y'all were basically whiteboarding these ideas, he was like, that's just incredible, an idea. I think he was jealous that he had thought of the idea.
Yeah, it was weird because, like I said, I have a lot of very weird ideas, and Dylan and I would get together once a week, and I would just throw idea after idea after idea at him, and we would have our actors and our crew of some nobodies together, and they were just kind of saying like, hey, this watching you guys just in this meeting is really funny. So, like I said, when we hooked up with IBM TV the first time, we're like, hey, we kind of have this idea. It's really just listening to our meeting, but we have these interesting concepts always going on. But yeah, we Dylan and I actually were just talking yesterday about a way to kind of make it more interactive and go back to a live format so that everyone can kind of chip in. We recently were asked to do, it was called an Indie Pod Summit, and it was for indie podcasters. And we didn't really know what we were going to do because we have like 10 shows right now. So they asked us just to do a live version. And most of our shows are scripted, and we have a lot of actors. One of the only things we do that's not scripted at all is Talking Upstream. So we ended up doing a very short form version of Talking Upstream. It was about a half an hour long, but through their Twitch stream and their Facebook, we were getting comment after comment after comment to make our show different and cooler and bigger. And it made it so fun. Well, for us, it made it very fun, but also made the time just went by so fast because there's just so many ideas we were going down. So we definitely would rather go to a live format. We like engagement. That's more our style anyway. If we're not going to create something with like sound effects and background music, if it's just talking to people, then we would like to talk to as many people as possible.
Yeah, and that's what I was liking about it. Is gave you that opportunity to talk to more and more people and get more and more folks engaged. I know it wasn't quite getting to that, but I felt it was going to get to that point at some point or another. And that's one of the things that I really enjoyed about was the whole engagement aspect and everything. For those that are watching and don't know about these pod conferences, I do know what you're talking about. But for those that don't know about them, how did y'all get involved with that? And that's one of the other things that I noticed was that you started doing more of these pod, like even some other pod networks. And I saw that some of your guests in these pre-recorded versions of Talking Upstream have been from these pod networks.
Yeah, we started when Talking Upstream when we when Dylan and I kind of locked in on this concept of what Talking Upstream was, which was just this 90-minute writer's room and see if we can create a story live or on the fly. Mostly it all started back to about a year ago when, I met Dylan when I moved to Colorado about 2 years ago. And at the beginning of 2020, we were set to make a movie. We were going to make our first short film together. And then, COVID and everything kind of happened and Colorado shut down pretty quickly. So we didn't want to put anybody in harm's way just to make a project for us. So we tried to find a way to make all of our stuff in a different medium and not just like a movie. So we started taking some of our concepts that we were going to do movies or short films at and put them in podcast form, almost like an audio drama. And that was really to teach us how to edit sound, how to put a cast together, how to, collect data from a bunch of people and get it going. And it was a safer way for us just to collect audio from people instead of making sure people could be at a certain place at a certain time. And hey, there's Dylan.
I've been here the entire time, Zach. I heard every word.
Oh, okay. Well, Dylan can tell you the truth. No. So then, Silicon Angels was our very first show, and that was the one that we formatted to be an audio drama. So we kind of wrote it to be a found footage style. And all of our shows, we kind of like, okay, well, how can we make this into an audio format? And that's kind of when we hooked up with Talking Upstream or with International Broadcast Media Television. And, they offered us to do something for their channel. And Talking Upstream was just something that kind of we were sitting on anyway. It was like, let's just do this. So it all started because we were trying to make a movie and we couldn't. So
keep trying.
Yeah. No, we're going to continue to try. Yeah.
No, I think the movie's going to come your way. And like I said, the folks that are behind the scenes that make those big decisions, they're going to hire y'all and y'all going to make movies and cartoons and everything else that y'all been doing. I was saying to Zach Dylan that I've been missing making those comments and you grabbing those comments because I know it's you grabbing them, but y'all changed the format and y'all switched up on me so I don't get to have that same fun of getting those comments added in there. So I'm missing that from y'all.
Yeah, it's an unfortunate trade-off not having you populate the chat. I heard Zach talk about we did the live show for the IndiePod Summit, and yeah, it's really nice to have people watching live because you get ideas that you never, at least in my experience, would not have thought of. And generally, sometimes a good swerve is what a story needs to really make it worth developing.
Yeah, I agree with you. That swerve or that pivot, and I think pivot is everybody's new favorite word in the pandemic era. Everybody's talking about those swerves or those pivots, and I'm always hearing that conversation. Now, for those that are watching, like I said, I just texted Ronnie, so hopefully he's going to pop in at some point or another. But those that are watching, and Ronnie also came out of the world of stand-up comedy, and actually I have an interesting story about that because we did a show with Martin Lawrence, so hopefully he'll pop in and we can share that story. Oh. But definitely, I know Zach, you had some stand-up comedy background. So what is that like, and how did you get into stand-up comedy? And then I'm going to ask Dylan about his creative background as well. But for Zach, what was the whole stand-up comedy world like for you? And do you still do that when you're not doing the Talking Upstream stuff?
So I grew up on the East Coast. I was born and raised in Maryland, and then I kind of grew up in Delaware. And I had a child at a very early age. I had my daughter when I was 19. And so I kind of went to work pretty quickly in my life, but I started working in restaurants because it was an easy thing for me to do as far as talking. And then I became a bartender at 21. And that's when, in Delaware, you have to be 21 to be a bartender. And people kept telling me like, oh, these stories are so crazy and blah, blah, you should do stand-up comedy. And I would drive to Philadelphia and go to open mic nights and go to see some of my favorite comedians in Philadelphia. And then a couple times, like I just would get the nerve to like sign up for open mic. And I'm like, oh, I hope they don't pick me. But if I do, I'll do something. I wanted the experience of being on stage and seeing if I could come up with something. So I went probably 3 straight weeks. They did it every Tuesday night. So I went 3 straight Tuesday nights and I didn't get picked the first 2. I had a lot of confidence going into the third one. It's like, I'm not going to get picked, whatever. No big deal. I signed up and I got picked to go first. And I was completely shook and I didn't know what I was going to do. And at the time I was going through just weird stress of like, having a kid and trying to just live in the world, and a lot of my jokes, I guess, were just what I was going through with my kid. And it was pretty funny. People really liked my speaking style and I got really into it. I'm like, okay, I'm going to try to write some jokes. I'm going to go back. And I remember going home and really just hardcore trying to write jokes and write punchlines and write a story arc. And I went back and I tried to do these bits, and it just was not working. And I didn't know why. I didn't have the timing right. Nothing would just work in the proper way. So I got frustrated, and I stopped my jokes. I just started talking about writing a joke, and that going back into just real stories and what I was actually going through instead of these, fake things for punchlines. And so I started going probably once a month, and then I started getting asked to do it once every 2 months at this place called Helium Comedy Club in Philadelphia. And I did it for a while, and it was pretty cool. And I got invites to be part of different improv groups, because that's more my style, is speaking and kind of coming up with something on the fly, which is why working with Dylan is so good for me. But because I had a kid and because I was in the restaurants and I started owning restaurants at the time too, I lost a lot of the time that I needed to do that and to hone that kind of craft. So when we moved to Colorado, the move was so that I can get back into comedy and I could get back into starting to do something for me now that my daughter's 21. And unfortunately, the virus hit. So that slowed a lot of that down. But the plan is to some degree do some sort of comedy, and that's why I'm pushing Dylan to do a lot of these stories with me, because it is an outlet for me to do some sort of comedy or to get something off of my chest. So that's pretty much it.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Dylan, I've never asked you this before, but what was your creative background? Because like I said, I knew that Zach was stand-up comedy, but what was your own creative background?
So I grew up in a house under two musician professor parents. Both of them have my mom has a PhD in piano performance. My dad has his master's in trumpet and composition. They've both been professors for a long time. So I've grown up in like an artistic household. Very early on, my dad and I used to read before I'd go to bed, like way young. Remember we read Lord of the Rings together when I was like 8 or something like that. So I've had a background reading. I've been a book kid for a long time. So coming up into like middle school, my English teachers in my grade schools were all very supportive of the kids who wanted to put words down onto paper. I think partially because we were a rural Ohio school and a lot of the focus was on the sports program. So I think the English teachers took any opportunity to encourage the artistic kids any chance they could get. And it was 8th grade or so where I really kind of considered writing as like something I would want to do throughout life. And so I kind of looked at that through high school. Went to Bowling Green State University for creative writing with a minor in film studies, just so I could, because they say you want to if you major in writing, you want to minor in what you write about. And I was like, I could do film reviews or something like that. And it turns out most of the major film review segments in a lot of papers are just kind of run by the same people across the country. So I was like, whatever. I started writing a novel in college. It's like it's a Western sort of like fantasy genre, super nerd novel, which I completed a few years after I graduated. So I have a manuscript sitting around for a little bit. A few short pieces. I've done I do a lot of tabletop game design, so like Dungeons and Dragons style, sort of like writing game books or adventures for D&D. And then as I was out here in Colorado, I did a lot of freelance, just technical writing. I've done that just to get some cash in my pocket. It pays okay doing writing resumes for people. And then when I met Zach, I first met him when we were at work together, and we latched on to our similar taste in pop culture and our similar way of kind of analyzing and discussing stories, and how we both kind of like to go off the beaten, we're not derivative. We like to do stuff that hasn't been done before. And it would be these moments where he'd come up to me at work and be like, so what do you think? And then he'd say something completely I was completely unready for. And I'm just like, I don't really know. Well, I suspect it would go like this and this and that. And we got to this point where he asked me what my like training was. And I told him creative writing with film. And he looks at me and goes, okay, you're exactly who I need. And we started meeting up. We had a few false starts, as you do. We have some prototype recordings of various like movie discussions and things like that. We just haven't done anything with because it was all proof of concept. And then we just kind of fell into this perfect storm of Silicon Angels with our friends and people who are willing to give voice to it. And Zach is very good at generating kind of like, he's good at just kind of spitting chaos and lending form to thought. And then I guess I'm kind of like that. I'm kind of a filter a little bit, not to not that Zach needs much of a filter, but Zach will just kind of provide a lot of material, and then we'll back and forth to refine it into something that I think we're both really satisfied with.
I can definitely relate to being a filter. One of the stories that I used to do, and like I said, just texted him and everything, but when Ronnie was managing the comedy club in North Carolina, and it's actually a comedy club that Martin Lawrence performed at before Martin Lawrence was as big as he is now and everything. But when he was doing that, it was a comedy club that was in an upstairs building of a restaurant. I think the restaurant was several things. It was a French restaurant. It was a number of other things. But after the comedy club was done, there's like a big parking lot. And in that big parking lot, the comedians, myself, and others would wind up just sitting there cracking jokes on each other. And I wound up being kind of like the straight man Foles. So like I was the person that would go out of something or do something or mention something, and then there would be a whole routine just based on whatever was going on during that time. But you gotta remember, this is like, I think the comedy club closed at like around 12 or 1 o'clock. At that time, there was a breakfast place across the street. So kind of like a waffle and egg type joint, because that's a national chain, but it wasn't a waffle and egg. It was a more local type joint. But literally that stayed open, I think, till 5 or 6. So I was much younger. So we would go there and kick it in that parking lot until we all wound up stumbling into the bed and into this waffle and egg kind of like place and having our early morning breakfast at like 5 a.m., 4 a.m., 6 a.m. or some weird hour like that. So I know about that whole concept of being the straight man from experience, because I was probably in, I want to say the 90s or early 2000s that this was going on. And I was sitting there going like, I cannot believe I stumbled across these crazy folks that are comedians and everything, but y'all are a different class of beings and everything. Another different class of beings, and I just mentioned them earlier, is restaurant owners. And I don't know, Zach, how did you manage to own a restaurant, and how did you manage to keep your sanity while you were owning a restaurant? Because like I said, that to me, and I've got some restaurant owning friends, but I'm trying to figure out how y'all even maintain sanity, because now I know y'all can give up on sanity because they're saying like that 60% of the restaurants are probably going to close or something ridiculous like that. But when you were doing it, it was at a better time for restaurants. So how did you even manage to survive?
We managed to survive by just listening to people and actually caring. That was our thing. We really just cared what our staff thought. We cared what our customers thought. I got into it early. Like I said, my grandmother owned restaurants when I was young. So I started working in restaurants when I was like 12. Then legally working in restaurants when I was like 17, 18. So I was kind of always in the restaurant thing. And I always have a way of just trying to understand people and helping them find the thing that they need, whatever it is, whether it's just a conversation or, and sometimes at a grocery store or in a restaurant, whatever. And I always kind of found myself being a leader of the service people. I found ways to upsell without sounding stupid or, making people spend money they didn't want to spend, but just giving good experiences. So it was always easy for me to kind of rise to the top of like a service group. And then one time I met this guy, and his name was Javier in Delaware, and he was running a kind of a little chain of restaurants. And he asked me to be part of his group, and me and him together owned 2. And then collectively we bought 4 more restaurants. So we had 6 total, and also like a mini grocery store. But I think the thing that really helped us stand out was that we really genuinely cared. So a couple of our restaurants, we tried to hire people that didn't have restaurant experience, but had experience with like farming and had experience with helping out the community and had experience in teaching. And you can teach anybody how to work in a restaurant, which is just ask somebody a question about food, write that down, and then give that paper to somebody else. That's literally as hard as working in a restaurant can be. So we wanted to teach good people how to be restaurant employees instead of how to find restaurant employees and teach them to be good people. So then it kind of just turned into, we were really just the thoughtful, caring people. And then, with my help, Javier won Restaurateur of the Year in Delaware, and we kind of just popped off, and we started doing comedy nights, and we wanted to be fresh as far as Delaware goes. There's not a lot of things in Delaware to do. There's no sporting events except for like minor league, and there's not a lot of things except for, movie theaters. So we would host Cinco de Mayo parties because we were a Mexican restaurant, and we ended up having one Cinco de Mayo party that had like 5,000 people show up, and it made like a big deal for Delaware. And then we became like the official Cinco de Mayo party for a couple of years in a row, and we ended up having like bands come from Mexico up and starting like an actual U.S. tour and having our restaurant being on their tour, and it was a cool thing, and yeah, that was cool. And then I had this conversation with my daughter, and I spent a lot of time in the restaurant. The problem with the restaurant, you know, and I went to the CIA, so I wanted to be a chef. I went to bartending school. I wanted to, you know, craft alcohol content. You know, I trained with breweries, so I wanted to understand how beer was made. But I spent so much time learning how to be good at that I kind of forgot to spend time everywhere else in my life. And that is the downside of people that work hard in a restaurant. Because if you do care, you want to put more time and effort into it. And if you are a leader, then not many people can do what you do. And the difference with working in a restaurant versus working at Google is if you're important, they can't do it without you. Whereas if you work in a big company and you don't go to work one day, nobody knows. It's no big deal. Whereas I'm working 6 days a week and I'm working open to closes. If I don't show up one day, the whole place could just go down. So then you start preparing yourself mentally, like, okay, I got to spend 70 hours a week here. I got to spend 80 hours a week here. I got to make sure that it's where I need to be so that I can step out. And I kind of lost track of my family. And I sat down with my daughter a couple of years ago, and I'm like, hey, man, like I spent a lot of time in this. I need to get back in touch with you. So like, what do you want to do? And she just said, I want to just go hiking in the mountains. So I sold all of my stuff. I sold my restaurants, and we just drove to Colorado and drove here without a job, drove here without a place to live. And I just found those things for us because that's what we needed to do. So it was hard, but if you're good and you're passionate, it is a love, and that's it. It is a passion. And I have not many passions, but I will go a very long distance for those passions. So I think that's how the people in the restaurant survive. Some survive with alcohol, unfortunately, but most of us survive strictly on passion and energy drinks.
Gotcha. And what got you to Ohio to Colorado, Dylan? Like I said, I know the story of how Zach got there, but how did you get there from Ohio?
Well, so I was in college in Ohio, and then I moved to Ann Arbor for a girl at the time. We were there for a few years, and when that ended, I stayed in the area, and I worked a few jobs. I worked some pizza gigs. I worked some restaurant stuff. I worked general food service. I spent some time working for a board game bar, kind of. It was like a board game bar, that sort of thing. And I was doing a lot of technical writing. It wasn't really what I was feeling. It wasn't what I was interested in doing. And I was in an area I hadn't originally chosen to live in. So it was getting to the point where I'd been there for about 5 or 6 years. And I'm like, I'm just kind of spinning my wheels out here. The board game bar was under relatively bad management, which, you know, I had known at the time. And looking back, it's been shut down since I left. So, you know, called that one. But I had a friend. My sister used to live out here in the Broomfield area, which is between Boulder and Denver, and she moved out to Ann Arbor to live with my girlfriend at the time and I after she broke up with her girl. It was this whole twisted kind of like breakup, flee to Michigan. Her friend from Colorado had like a falling out with her family. She fled to Michigan and lived with us. We had like 4 or 5 people in this 2-bedroom apartment for a while. The friend went back to Colorado. And then she was living in a house with a whole bunch of people, and she knew that I kind of put out feelers being like, hey, anyone have anywhere to recommend that's kind of like Ann Arbor? I like the art scene there. I volunteered to them. I worked at a folk music festival. I helped their folk festival every year. I worked at their venue. I did a whole bunch of just art and nature volunteering. So I'm like, anything out there kind of like this, because I'm looking to move. She gets in contact with me, and it's like, hey, one of the people who lived in our house vanished on us. She like moved all our stuff out in the middle of the night and just left because she wasn't on the lease. And she goes, if you can get out here in a month or two, that room is yours. And I'm like, my lease is up next month. So I drove out. I saw the area. I hung out in Denver with them for about a week. Drove back, put in my notice everywhere, packed up everything I could in my tiny little Ford hatchback. And Zach has fit in that car with difficulty. So he knows what I'm saying when it's like, I packed up my guitar, I packed up my ukulele, my computer, and effectively my clothing. whatever I could fit in this tiny vehicle. I drove 1,700 miles out to Colorado, and I've been out here since. Yeah. Found a job at a grocery store that subsidizes my writing work, so it's good enough for now.
Yeah. A friend of mine actually just did that. He actually just moved, I think about 2 weeks ago. About 2 weeks ago, from Detroit to Durham. And literally he wanted to get a nicer apartment. So he's got a nice apartment. It's actually one of the fancier apartments here in the Durham area. But he did the same thing that you're talking about, Dylan, because I remember he called me up. He said, I'm going to fit everything I can into his, he's got a Jeep. So it's like a Jeep type car. He's like, I'll fit everything that I can into there. And what doesn't fit isn't coming. So that was his kind of mentality. And he's kind of like, I know I was there with him, not this past weekend, but the weekend before, and he was just getting his internet placed in at that time. So yeah, he's been here about 2 or so weeks and everything, because he's a motivational speaker, used to do some stand-up comedy, I think both in North Carolina and in Michigan. But he was like, I got to get out of here and I'm just going to do it this way. And like I said, when I talked to him yesterday, he was having enjoying the concept of being in a new town, but also kind of having those anxieties about being in a new town as well, because you're there and you don't know. Fortunately, he knows me and he knows a couple of other people, but for the most part, he's kind of like going in there without, even though he's originally from Raleigh, which is the town, one city over. He has been out of touch for 15, 20 years probably. So it's a whole new bag of wax from my friend Dino Comer. So I can understand what he's thought about. And as you were saying your story, I was like, I think I've heard this before, but it was more recently.
It's a pretty classic one. Yeah, I think so. I had to wrestle with health insurance and medication, that sort of thing. And I was like, all right, I got to ration this until I know what I can do. You know. That's some of
the things he was talking to me about, because he's like, I need to get a new bank. He needed to get a new like primary care provider, and he's actually involved with the veterans, so he has to go figure out when he can have his first VA appointment. And there was a number of other things that he was doing for the switching over, even like switching over, I think, his phone and, like I mentioned before, his internet service. So definitely all of that, he would definitely be able to relate, because like I said, he just recently did this in the last couple of weeks and everything. The quick question I have for both of y'all is, they're talking about, and it's one of the things I'm hoping that Ronnie will come on and he can answer from an industry standpoint, but there's all this conversation about the movie industry going strictly virtual and being that way now for a year or two. And I'm thinking, as creative people, do you think that that's going to help y'all? Because I'm thinking that this is going to be plenty of opportunities to sell all of these crazy talk ideas that have been coming up with Talking Upstream, since they're going directly to the internet and not necessarily going to movie chains, because they're saying movie chains are going to be shut down for a while, possibly a year.
Yeah, I saw recently that, like, I guess Warner Brothers said that they're going to put all of their movies out in the theater and as well as HBO Max at the same time, which is cool. Yeah, I mean, I don't want to speak for Dylan, but our concept is that we talk ourselves to a streaming service. I think that what we do provides a lot of weight in the streaming industry. Right. Like, we, are constantly coming up with content. I don't know. I mean, I whether we make a movie or we go to streaming or whatever it is, like, we want to make content. And I guess if streaming gets popular and then there's more and more content that is needed, then that's where we're going to be. Yeah.
Great. I'd love to hear what you got to say about that, Dylan. And I'm actually going to do a little something different, because it looks like Ronnie's trying to call me right now. So hopefully that means he's trying to get online. So I'm going to let y'all two interview each other on my show while y'all talk about what's going on. And I'll be right back.
All right.
All right.
I was going to go into, like, I'm worried that this is going to result in major theater chains being owned by Disney, Netflix, AT&T. As the smaller theaters won't be able to compete. They get shut down, and the law about producers owning distribution houses has been repealed. So I'm expecting Disney-themed theaters to start.
Yeah, I agree, but I think that they see such a monetary value in having people spend $11.99, $12, $30 a month. Whereas normal moviegoers go to the movies probably 3-4 times a year, I guess, except for like big blockbusters. Yeah. So if they can monetize and they can grab 15, 20 of your dollars every month and then keep feeding you content with advertisements in it, selling you shoes and t-shirts and, product placement for other things that you need. But there is something to be said about the movie experience itself. Mm-hmm. And there isn't something that people can do at home to mimic the movie experience except for brand new movies.
Even that, you're not really getting what I consider the theater experience, which is, you sit in a large room with a big screen, potentially with other people, ideally, obviously COVID not in consideration, with other people, and you have that collective experience of viewing something. I went with some friends to see the 4K Akira in a theater, and this was back in like August when things weren't so crazy, and we were all very careful about it. But it was a good experience to go with like 2 or 3 friends and watch a movie. Like, we had all seen the movie before, but it's nice to sit there. You have, your junk food, and you do it a few times a year.
Yeah.
And I think there's something to be said for that. I'm just thinking when they do open up, it's going to be a very different chain of ownership when they do.
Yeah. Do you think that like streaming services will ultimately own the movie theaters, and it's like you can watch this at home, or you can spend a little bit extra money and see it in the theaters? Like there's Amazon theaters, there's Disney theaters, and Netflix theaters.
I wouldn't be surprised to see the studios start acquiring theater chains. Like I think Cinemark is owned by some production company. I think so. I wouldn't be surprised to see Disney-based theaters. That one is the one I'm most expecting. I think Disney is going to start owning their own movie houses.
Well, here's the question. Yeah. Would you sit in a theater to watch a series?
Ooh, probably not. I think part of why I like the theater going experience is that it is condensed. It's like I go in, I know I'm not going to spend more than 3 hours on a long one to sit. I don't think I want to go back. Do you mean like go back and then go back next week and then go back next week?
Yeah, or have the ability of binging 2 at a time if you wanted to.
I wouldn't. I mean, we see that with Marvel, which is kind of the world's most expensive TV series right now.
Yeah, true. They're about to go into season 4.
I know. I wouldn't be surprised to see, I don't know what to call them, prestige series, which is a series of films that are supposed to form a long-form series. But I would rather watch that sort of thing at home because I can take it at my own pace. I can pause it and get up and use the bathroom or like make dinner or something.
Yeah.
I don't have to sit in a dark room for a 2.5-hour movie and then go back and watch the next one. Because I got tired of Marvel after Endgame. I saw the Spider-Man one and I'm like, oh, cool. I guess I'll see if there's another Spider-Man. I don't really need to see Eternals.
Yeah. Do you think if COVID does shut down the theater for another year, do you think that'll alter the idea of the blockbuster?
I just read this morning regarding the Warner Brothers, I think is the one that said they're going to HBO Max.
Yeah.
The Warner Brothers. Lionsgate is I think suing them to prevent them from getting Dune, maybe Wonder Woman. Few big blockbusters are actively being like fought over. And I think the result of those suits are going to be what ultimately determines what happens with movie theaters and blockbusters. Because, I mean, this year we've seen revenue for theaters just completely bottom out. People are saying that Tenet was a flop despite Chris Nolan's ability to generate ticket sales. But using the term flop feels like it might be, a little tone deaf considering the circumstances.
Yeah, I think currently the highest revenue blockbuster of 2020. Do you know what it is?
It's like Empire Strikes Back?
I think it's Sonic the Hedgehog.
Oh,
I think Sonic the Hedgehog is the only movie that's made over $100 million in theaters this year, or something stupid.
That was the big Valentine's Day release for everybody.
Yeah, that was the last movie I think that I saw in. No, that's probably not true. But it's one of the last movies I saw in theaters. Yeah. Actively being like, am I going to go? Because I used to go to the theater probably like twice a week and just see whatever was out and re-see something. And you know how we do. We rewatch and rewatch. Yeah. But now it's like, no, I don't want that. Now, do you think that there's going to be more along the lines of like the Mulan aspect, where it's like, let's pitch this at a subscription fee plus extra, which I guess is an annoying way to think of Disney Plus.
So I think the Mulan one, I think that $30 is an additional tier of streaming where you have access to future releases. It's not. It was $30 for Mulan's access.
Yep.
Now
currently I don't have I didn't pay the extra $30,
Mhm.
and this week Mulan was released for everybody for free.
Yeah.
So it was $30 to get it for 3 months early access, I think.
I don't see that. I don't know what I mean. Obviously, I don't know the numbers on Mulan because, of course, Disney owns the distribution channel and don't have to release their numbers, which is convenient. Netflix does the same thing, but I don't see that as sustainable. I don't know. It depends on. I could see that working for like a Star Wars movie or a Marvel movie. I don't see that working for like whenever they release a live action Hercules. I don't think anybody's going to pay $30 to see Hercules live action.
Now, do you think the $30 was a ruse to be able to drop it to 10, and then have people say like, "Well, $10 isn't that bad. Mulan was 30."
Are they dropping it to 10?
Well, I don't know.
Hypothetically.
Yeah, nothing about that.
I wouldn't be surprised if Disney tries to keep on the paid premium. $30 feels like a lot.
It is a lot
to me, at least, for a movie like that. Like, and I didn't see it, so I can't speak on the quality.
Oh, it's awful.
Yeah, I'm not surprised.
Oh, it is awful.
I'm not shocked. All the Disney live actions that I've seen, I saw not Lady and the Tramp.
Classic.
Lady and the Beast. No, Beauty and the Beast.
Lady and the Beast?
I don't know.
Is that public domain?
Yes, Beauty and the Beast. Whatever. I saw that one, and I'm just like, this feels really kind of like, it feels plastic.
Yeah.
Where like the previous one is like nice sculpted pewter.
Yeah.
This one is a plastic. Like, you know what I mean?
Well, Beauty and the Beast was almost a shot-for-shot remake, whereas Mulan is a retelling of a story.
I know that because... Go ahead.
Yeah, because they changed a lot of the things. Well, they changed a couple things about the story of Mulan herself. Like it is chi focused, and apparently girls aren't allowed to use chi. Boys are allowed to use chi, but she is a powerful girl from the very, very start. My problem with that is that she goes through no arc that way, because if she's powerful in the start and then she's powerful at the end, the only real arc is I'm trying to save my dad, I think. I don't really know.
You feel like it cheapens that a little bit, where it's like the original could have been anybody?
Well, my problem is that if you have a movie like Mulan, which is a phenomenal movie, and then you remake it, but not better, you're doing it just for money, and that's annoying. So, hey, Marc's back.
I'm back, but I was enjoying y'all's conversation, and me and Ronnie were talking. He's trying to get on. He's trying to do the whole phone internet thing. So hopefully he's going to pop on any second. But I was talking to him, and he is, hopefully in or out. I saw him pop in one time, and it was like, that whole you can't see the screen. So hopefully he's on his way to popping in, because he literally just got off the phone with me and everything. So that's kind of the plan, and we'll see what goes on. But definitely, I did see him pop in, and he's traveling and is going to hopefully join our conversation. So we're just going to continue that. But I was hearing y'all talking about like whether you would want things or not. And I see that Ronnie has appeared. And there's Ronnie. Ronnie, you're here.
Hello.
Ronnie.
Oh, man, I can't hear.
Ronnie, we see you.
Hello.
Hey, Ronnie, we hear you.
Oh, why can't I hear?
Very faint.
Huh? Ronnie? We hear Ronnie. We're having a moment now.
This is us on Twitch the other day.
Yeah.
let me just try without.
No, Ronnie, we hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you, Ronnie.
Hello?
Yes, we hear you.
I think it's...
Oh, let me chat with him and let him know. We hear him. We hear him.
Why don't you come over and do this?
Hold on. We see you and we hear you. And we hear you. This is like hello, he's getting his headphones. That's always a good thing.
Okay, hello?
Hello, can y'all hear? Can you hear me, Ronnie?
Oh, yeah, now I can hear. I think it was my headphones.
There we go. Ronnie, I wanted you to meet two good friends of mine. This is Zach and Dylan. They do Talking Nobodies. Remember when I told you about the whole concept of a show where you whiteboard the idea and everything. That's what these
Yes,
guys
yes,
do.
yes, 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 yes.
Yeah,
Okay,
so
you're
I
telling me
told them
about that.
about
Yes,
you
yes.
and everything, and I remember you thought that was an amazing idea. Ronnie, by the way, Zach and Dylan produced that film this Christmas. So Ronnie's over there in California hustling and making deals and moves and all of that stuff on a regular basis. So that is what Ronnie does. So he's got his own company over there in California. But like I said, whenever we get these projects done, this is the man we want to know. So this is the man behind the mirrors and all of that.
Hey, guys, excuse me. I'm driving, so I apologize for not being as attentive in terms of looking directly at you guys. But it's a pleasure meeting you. I'm actually in an RV. We're just coming back from a trip, so forgive my being on a end of my vacation, if you will.
Oh, no, you're good, man.
Right.
We definitely don't need people to look at us to talk to us.
No, sometimes I prefer the opposite.
Yeah, we prefer people not to even see us. So
Look, I know that's right. Look, it'd be like all of a sudden you just see this tragic accident unfold in front of you. Like, oh my God!
It's an idea, Zach. Write that down.
I will share with them, Ronnie. I will share with them how I used to be your straight man back in the day when you had the comedy club here in Durham, North Carolina, and Brett, and others would be there. You were running the comedy club at the time and was doing a lot of booking. Zach is actually a former stand-up comedian out of the Philadelphia area and things of that nature. So I was sharing with them a little bit about our early days. So if you want to just explore a little bit more of that with our folks, I'm sure that our listeners around the globe would love to know about the connection between you, me, and how you got out to California.
Absolutely. I'll try to make it brief, but yeah, Marc and I met. There was a comedy club in Durham, North Carolina, that opened up called Charlie Goodnight's Comedy Zone. And I don't know if you guys are familiar with any of those two names, but they were a collaboration of Charlie Goodnight's, which was a sort of an A room in Raleigh, and then Brad Greenberg owned a bunch of comedy clubs throughout the Southeast called Comedy Zone. And so those two guys came together to open up it was called Charlie Goodnight's Comedy Zone. And so I went there. I was a student in North Carolina Central. And I went there because I wanted to be in the business. And I just wanted to go up there and get a job doing something, whatever I could do. And they ultimately gave me a job waiting tables. And then through a bunch of, series of things, it was a new company. They kind of pulled the plug, and some other guys came along and wanted to keep it going. And through that, I got the opportunity to take over the club. And somewhere in that time period is when Marc and I met. And Marc was a writer, and Marc was doing, I know you were doing some freelance work, but you were working for a couple of specific newspapers. And Marc and I used to just, he would come up to the comedy club, and we just really got to know each other. And then he would, let me tag along when, we went to Marc, at least 2 or 3 concerts. Because you had to do interviews with the artists and stuff like that. So we just really formed this strong bond between he and I. And he also watched me sort of grow as a person that I was booking comics. I was doing other shows. I was obviously running that comedy club. And I was also, because my whole goal was to become a stand-up comic. I mean, that's why I went there, because I didn't know how to figure it out. In Durham, North Carolina, there's not a lot of outlets to do stand-up comedy. So, that became an opportunity for me. And so over the course of time, I started developing a little bit of an act, or whatever the case may be. The club ended up closing in 92. And in 93, I went back up to Washington, D.C. area, which is where I'd gone to high school. And that's when I really started, focusing in on my stand-up. And from that time until about 99, I was just doing straight stand-up, traveling around. I got good enough. And then I decided to take my talents to Los Angeles. And so 20 years later, I'm still out here. So that's sort of
I appreciate that, Ronnie. I know 2 of the stories that they would love to hear from you, and then I'm sure they got other questions. But I know they would probably love to hear about how we did that crazy concert with Martin Lawrence, and that was probably in the late 90s as well. So if you would share a little bit about that crazy concert And also, I'm sure that they would love to hear a little bit about some of the other things that were going on during that time.
Yeah, absolutely. So what had happened was I started booking comics in other areas, right? And because I saw an opportunity, and to do this, and so at some point I said, you know what, I want to do a bigger show, like a show that's a little more substantial, where you have to rent out a venue, and a 1,000-seater, 1,500-seater, something to that effect. And so there were two comics that I was considering at that time that were in my price range, which was around $4 to $5 grand, and they were Martin Lawrence and Chris Rock. Those were the two ones I felt like, okay, these two guys are at the precipice of something, right? And I, in my opinion at that time, I felt like Martin was the one at that time, because this is 91-ish, I guess, 91, 92, and 92, I think. Anyway, point being, he had done a couple of movies. He had done what's the House Party, which he had a nice little role in that. He had done Talking Dirty After Dark, which wasn't as big a movie, but it definitely had some a little gravitas in the African American community. And he had done HBO One Night Stand. And so I said, man, I think that'll be the guy. So I went through the necessary rigmarole to try to get in contact with him and his agent and all this kind of stuff. And so I finally was able to do that. And so Marc was with me this entire time. I mean, he's with me when I'm trying to raise the money. He's with me once I raise the capital, when we're out putting out flyers, when we're out trying to get people to sell the tickets for us at locations, and getting radio on board. So anyway, a quick interesting story. So there was a high school right across the street from the comedy club. I think it's called Durham High, right, Marc? Durham
Yeah, it's called.
High.
It's
At that time,
Durham
right?
School of the Arts now. It was Durham High.
Right. Exactly. So the guy that was there was a guy that was what they call the building director, and he oversaw, I guess, the schools in that district or whatever in terms of the facilities. And I found out you could rent a facility for like $150, which is like, what? That's dirt cheap, right? Considering when you're trying to get like a 1,500-seater. So at any rate, I went to him, and it was very interesting. I talked to him, and he goes, and I said my name, and we're from a small community. I'm originally from Hillsborough, North Carolina, and Hillsborough, Durham, Chapel Hill, they're small communities, and so people know each other. And so when I said my name is the same as my father's. And so apparently he knew my mom and my dad from, like, I don't know, childhood back in the day. But the way he said it made me feel like he didn't like somebody. I don't know if he didn't like my mom or my dad, but he said it in a way that I was like, okay, this might not be good. And I don't know what my mom or dad could have done to this man, but it didn't feel good, right? So I go, okay. So then he tells me, he says, well, no, you know what, Marc, that's right. No, I was going to do the show at Hillside. I'm sorry, the school across from Central. So anyway, his office was over there where Durham High is now. That's what it was. So anyway, point being, he says, yeah, I know your mom and dad, whatever. And then he goes on to tell me that if I can get the principal of this particular high school to say yes, then he'd be okay. Now, the way he said that let me know that this principal never lets anyone do that, right? So I said, okay. So I'm talking to my dad, and as it turns out, he knew that guy. They used to play basketball. And so I said, hey, can you call him? So he said, yeah. So he calls the guy at the high school, and the guy says, hey, sure, it's your son? No problem. So this is where I made my fatal mistake. So I said, okay, I'm good. So then I don't have to worry about it. So we proceeded on to set up locations to, purchase tickets. I started doing radio advertising and just, flyers, and generally putting the show together, right? And again, like I say, Marc is with me the entire time, man. We're all over the place, man. I pick Marc up, and we're going all over the place, doing all kinds of whatever, types of things we need to do to set this thing up. So as time is progressing, it's on the radio, everything's going great. About a week before the show, I go to pay this $150 to this guy that's the billing director. I get there, and this guy goes, and you could tell he was mad because the guy said yes, right? I'm like, this guy really is, what is his problem? So anyway, he goes, well, I'll tell you what. He said, if I hear one cuss word, I'm turning the lights on. I said, what? Martin Lawrence? I mean, like, his first word is going to be fuck. I mean, oh, excuse me, I'm sorry if I'm very curse. But I mean, like we know that Martin Lawrence is going to curse, right? And he's like, it better be Lucille Ball. This is what he said. He said, I'm not talking about Sinbad clean. Well, who is clean? He said, I'm talking about Lucille Ball clean. Like, just completely. And I'm like, and at that point, man, I'm 25 years old. I'm a young guy, and this is my first big show, and I got a lot of money out there, right? And I got nervous, man. And 1,500 people in this room that paid me their hard-earned money, and this man turns the lights on. I mean, that would be tragic. So I pulled back. I said, okay. I didn't know what to do. So at the same time, just a little bit of a rewind. The comedy club that I was running was inside of a building that had a German restaurant, a microbrewery, and a bar inside this, and a nightclub inside this building. It was October, and they were doing Oktoberfest. So they had blocked off a street. It had a huge tent that they were sort of doing the festivities in. So I went to the people that oversaw the building and everything, and I asked them, hey man, maybe I can use this tent. And they said, sure, no problem. So now we have Martin Lawrence coming to town to perform in a tent. So man, it was the craziest. It was and it was blocked. It was a street that was blocked off. So the backstage was the stoplight. Like there was you open the flap of the tent and the stoplight was there, changing throughout the night and cars driving by. So I had very interesting enough. There was one of the things I did while we were there is because Durham didn't have a thriving, comedy community. What I did is I would have like the middle act every weekend. I'd pay him a couple extra dollars, and I'd have him come up on Saturday and do him or her and do a little class or something like a workshop. And I had local comics that were trying to do stand up come up and learn and talk, ask questions and things of that nature. And one of those young comics that used to come up was a guy by the name of Ken Jeong. And Ken was a medical student over at UNC at the time.
Yeah, he's talking about the same Ken Jeong of Hangovers.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so Ken used to come up, and Ken was really naturally talented. He was very, very, very funny, and he could play the guitar. He was smart. I mean, he was a really, he had promise. Well, obviously, we could see he had problems there, but then, we didn't know all these things were going to happen. But the point is, he was sort of going back and forth. Is he going to continue with medical school? Does he want to do comedy? But at any rate, he was one of the guys that really stood out. So what I started doing with him, I started letting him come up to the comedy club and MC, and open and do things like that. He and a couple other people, Selected Hilarious, a couple other guys that were from UNC as well that were funny. And so because he was like my kind of favorite young guy, I let him open up the show. For Martin, and then this other guy named Terry Tuck, who was a local, he was like really, really good. Matter of fact, he was like Martin good. That's how good. Matter of fact, his manager started managing. Martin's manager started managing this guy afterwards. So he got a little shot there, and nothing really panned out, but he got a nice little shot. But anyway, point being, we had a really great show. But what ended up turning out happening was people were sneaking in the tent. It was I lost money. I mean, and I sold out. I was having to give money back because I had this venue had 750 seats, whereas the venue that I originally had, the high school, had like 1,200 seats. So at $10 a ticket, I mean, that's a substantial amount of money I lost, because I lost right there alone, I was like $5,000, right? And my margins weren't, and I needed that, you know what I mean? My margins weren't that high because I didn't, at that time, people weren't used to paying $20 and $30 to go to a show. And so I didn't know, so I priced it around 10 or 12 bucks. And so I really needed that extra 500 seats to make my money and be able to do it again. But that was our first big show. Marc came up, and Marc, I bet you still have that interview.
If I do, I don't know where it's at, but I'm gonna have to see if I can't dig it up or something. But yeah, that was a great interview with Martin and everything. And I remember a number of folks did things along those lines. Now, if you could, and then like I said, I'm sure that Dylan and them might have some questions about filmmaking because they've been into the game now for a little bit of time as well. But I would love you to share with our audience a little bit about the story of how this Christmas came about as well. Because when I mention your name, the two things that everybody talks about is this Christmas. As a matter of fact, I was at a dance event yesterday, a Zoom, not yesterday, but over the weekend, a Zoom type event. And the young lady was like, "Oh yeah, I remember this." They remembered the movie This Christmas, but I don't even know the details of how you got together with Chris, that was in that movie, Loretta Devine, and the rest of the folks.
Absolutely. In order for me to tell that part, I have to go back a little bit. I'll make it brief. So when I moved out here, and I one of the things I started doing was, some friends of mine were very, very close friends with the Wayans brothers. And so as a result, I got to know those guys, and we, hanging out, blah, blah, blah. And they knew I was a comic. And they were like, "Man, you gotta write. Like, you gotta write. That's and I'm not talking about jokes, but like write scripts, And I was like, yeah, man, I mean, that really made sense because that's something I always wanted to do anyway. So I started penning, started writing. And then after that, I ended up getting a writing job through another friend on a sketch comedy show on BET. So I really started, it was kind of funny. I couldn't write on a computer. My brain, I could only write in longhand, and then I had to copy it to the computer. Like, for whatever reason, that shows you how old I am. So at any rate, I ended up penning. Later on, I booked this show, this Fox series, because I was also an actor, and I booked this Fox series, and we were taping up in Maine. And one of the other actors was also a writer, and because by this time I'd been writing a couple of years or whatever, and working on it, and I was finishing my first script actually. And so me and this other actor, he had just finished his first script, and we really hit it off and decided, hey, let's write a script together. So for the next couple, 3-4 years, he and I started working on this script together. It's called Easier Softer Way at the time. And so finally, I won't go through all the details, we basically finished the script. And so, really I ended up finishing the script because some other stuff happened with him. So a friend of mine was a guy named Mekhi Phifer, who's an actor. And I had written a part for him in it. And so what I decided to do was write a short version of the script and shoot it and use that hopefully to raise capital to shoot the full script. So I gave him to my buddy Mekhi. Mekhi, he hit me up. He said, "Oh my God, this is hilarious. What are you gonna do with it?" I said, "Well, I'm gonna shoot a short version. I want you to play this part. Blah 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 blah." So he said, "Well, man, why don't we just try to do the whole thing?" And he wanted to do it with me, and I was like, "Yeah, I mean, this guy's on ER at the time. He's represented by William Morris. He has connections that I don't have." And so I was like, yeah, let's do it. And so through a series of, and that's a whole nother story. If you're interested, I'll get into it. But I'll just to get to this Christmas, because that's the question you asked. So he and I ultimately got that movie done, got it made. And when we got it made, we ended up getting a deal over at Warner Brothers through John. What's John's last name? John Wells. We got a deal through him. And so while we were there was this director named Preston Whitmore that we both knew. And Preston Whitmore was, well, he's a writer, but he also directs, but he's a writer. And he came to us because he had a movie set up over at Sony, Screen Gems. And that's where we had done Puff Puff Pass, the movie we did. And we had done that movie with Sony Screen Gems. And then the other producer on that project with us was a guy named Will Packer. And so all three of us started talking about this Christmas. It was a script that he had over at Screen Gems, which again was the same company that we had just produced this movie. And so we met with him, and initially he just really, very initially, he wanted Makai in the movie, right? And so Makai and I were talking about it, and I said, well, look, man, we need to get involved with this movie because read the script, it looked good. It looked like it had a lot of promise. And so that same year, we were going to the Super Bowl when it was in Arizona. I think it was 06, I don't remember whatever year it was. And Will Packer went with us. And so we went out there, we're hanging out. And so we started talking about this movie. Like, we asked Will, was he going to get involved with it? He said, well, I'm not sure. I'm thinking about it. Because Will had a deal with Screen Gems at the time. And so we said, well, look, we're about to meet with Clint Culpepper, who's the president of Screen Gems, about it. And so if you're going to do it, definitely put in the word for us, because we want to do it with you if you're going to do it. And so we met with Clint, and we had our little thoughts and blah blah blah, whatever the case may be. And so as a result, after we met, we talked with Will again some more, and we decided to all kind of come together and and pull it off. I mean, but at that point, obviously, it already had the funding because Sony Screen Gems was going to.
Yep.
Very good.
Yep. We still hearing you? Okay. Well, that was definitely some fascinating stories that he was sharing and everything.
Oh,
so
yeah.
definitely I know something. Ready, Ronnie?
Board. Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, we hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yes.
yeah, sorry. Yeah, so at that point we came on board. Yeah, we came on board. And that, because one of the tough things though is when you're doing a movie of this size, because it's not a big movie, and we're going after certain people who have certain level of gravitas in the business, and so it really was not very easy to get people to sign on necessarily. And unfortunately, and this is just the reality of the world we live in, sometimes when certain actors cross into a certain audience, and what I mean by that, when I say audience, I mean mainstream audience, sometimes to come and do a niche film, which this is an African-American Christmas film, which is the niche at the end of the day, some people will not, and again, it's not necessarily the actors themselves, it's the agents. So what was happening was we had to come on and be able to contact these people themselves because, for instance, Idris Elba. When we contacted Idris, because he's a friend, you know him. He said, and he had turned down the script. When we contacted him, he said, "Hey man, I never knew about it." His agent just said no, because his agent probably saw, "Hey, this isn't really going to do anything for his career. It's another African American movie. Nothing against him, but he's trying to cross into another, bigger budgets, bigger audiences and things of that nature." So we were able to go on and get Regina on board and Delroy Lindo on board, Idris on board. Chris was something different. Chris came on board because he just came on board. Matter of fact, I was the lone person in the room that wanted to do, because it came down between him and Neo, and I felt like I was wrong, I guess, but I felt like I said, well, Neo, I like Neo better. He is a better actor. And I also thought he was going to be a bigger star, and I was wrong by that too. But Chris came on just through the natural order of things. But a lot of the vets like Regina, Delroy, Idris, they came on, because we had conversations with them and such. So that was basically how it came about. We shot the movie, and we were pleasantly surprised that it was as successful as it was. So it was pretty cool.
Yeah, definitely. I don't know if Dylan or Zach got some questions for you, because I'm going to let them ask any. But just really quickly, how are you surviving? And I'm sure the audience would love to know this as well, in Hollywood during this pandemic era, because I know it's definitely impacting a lot of movie makers. So, Ronnie, how are you managing to make the movies? Because I know you're still making deals. We've talked on the phone a couple of times, so I know you're still working on deals and trying to make this thing even bigger than it's already been for you. But how are you maintaining in this time of what we're going through with the pandemic?
Well, it's just, I guess it's like everything else, man. Like, there's always different things that happen that are major. Like, honestly, like going through the streaming becoming popular was a major undertaking in terms of your philosophical view on how you, especially because for me, after we did this Christmas, we had a couple of really, really lucrative deals that came on the table, and this didn't work out, that didn't work out, and so we sort of, for me anyway, I sort of ended up going down the independent road, because I felt like if I'm going to only be able to get a movie done every few years, which is most people, I at least want to make a shitload of money when I do a film, because when you're doing studio films, you just don't make that, you don't make the same kind of, I mean, if you're Ron Howard, you do, but I'm saying if the average person, you don't get the same effort that you can if you do something independently, right? So, point being, so I started, sort of going down that road. I still have, some relationships, obviously with folks in the system, but again, I started focusing more on the independent route. So my point to that is the industry is constantly changing, right? Whether it be from, the idea of how is streaming affecting and VOD, and people are buying 100-inch television now. How is that affecting theatrical? And see, theatrical is the backbone of the system in which Hollywood has been set up on since day one, because it started in the theater. And so everything's set up off the theater. So it's been so COVID was really something as tough as it was or is in one aspect. It was actually just sped up the system to a certain extent. So now we know streaming has fully engaged itself and will never go away. Now it's a new medium. Now, what does that mean for theaters? Now, we already were going through something like somewhat. I mean, people, the attendance. I think if you go back to like the early 1900s, they said like 90% of the country, 90% of the country went to the movies every week. Can you imagine that? 90% of the country went to the movies every week. So over the years, that number has clearly, been diminishing, right? Because of other, when in the 80s, when home video hit. I mean, all these things are continuing to happen. So this is, to me, just another example of how the industry is just technology is pushing us in another direction. Doesn't mean that theater is going to be gone, but it is, other things are happening as well. So now what you have to do is you have to, look and see how is this model going to affect your bottom line. So if you're going to investors, how can you pitch your numbers, right? So how do you show, oh, this, because everything is determined on the opening weekend. Every other window is determined on opening weekend. So if you have a shitty opening weekend, then you know that all the deals that you have for all the other windows, whether it's the ancillary, VOD, well, obviously you got streaming now, but home video, free TV, pay TV, all those things are going to be affected if you have a horrible opening weekend. But if you have a great opening weekend, then you're going to do great numbers, in all the other windows. So now you don't really have that to use as a gauge on how you suspect or anticipate your film to perform, right? So now you're having to kind of re-examine it. Now, of course, if you're Sony and Paramount and all these guys, then it really comes down to, you have to sort of rewind. Where their issue is going to be is really the big tentpole movies, right? The big $150 million movies, because those are the ones that like need the theater. Like that's, and I don't know how they're working that out. I've been keeping up a little bit, but not so much because I don't do tentpole movies, so I really could care less what they do with tentpole movies. So I've really been keeping up with that per se, but I know that's an issue. So for me as an independent filmmaker, I had to start thinking about, and I've been already kind of thinking about this stuff anyway. What do I have? What resource do I have that I can create my own content, and what platform can I use to just put content out, right? While I'm still out here trying to, I have different projects at different companies, right, for funding, right? So I'm always having those conversations and trying to figure that out, and I'm sure they are as well. But I'm also, just as a filmmaker, trying to always figure out, okay, what can I do to stay creative and be able to put something out that I can control, that I don't need, a ton of money for, or a ton of resources to support. I'll give you an example. Buddy of mine, Mackay, is on a new show. They just started filming the second season. It's on Apple's new platform. It's a big show. I forgot the name of it, but and they're shooting on like Fox, Lotta, Paramount, somewhere. And it's not just about how is this gonna, they're on Apple, they're gonna stream it. But what this is about, man, they have to do filtration systems in the studio. The guy that there's a doctor on set or whatever. He said the stage, the sound stage they're shooting on is cleaner. And maybe he's exaggerating, but this is what he said. He said it's cleaner than an operating room at the hospital. Like they have these rules now. If you're doing union films, I mean, it's stringent. So now you got to have the resources to accommodate that. So shooting becomes a whole nother thing. But of course, there are a bunch of people out here shooting independent, right? And shooting stuff themselves and just figuring it out. They don't care. Just like there are people out there going to bars and having parties, without masks on and stuff like that. But those of us that are having to shoot within the confines of the rules of Hollywood or filmmaking, there's some obstacles, and so people are trying to figure that out. I'm not in that position. I don't have anything on the table that I'm about to shoot that is of that budget. That I'm doing. All the after SAG stuff, and so I'm just doing what I'm doing right now. Is I'm just sort of trying to shoot just small independent shorts that I can just put out on whatever platform I can put them out on, while all this stuff is unfolding, and seeing how it's going to, see where it's going to land at the end of the day. I had a project that I'm shooting in London, Los Angeles, London, and Nigeria, Lagos, Nigeria. And I partnered with a production company. It's just really a couple of wealthy guys who decided to do a production company. But we were moving forward with starting to put everything together right when COVID hit. And so that was an example, to your point, Mark, of like, oh, hey, everything just shifted. Everything shifted. Because now everyone's still trying to figure out travel, everyone's trying to figure out life. So now all of a sudden, filmmaking is, unless you are, a company that makes films and has a bunch of employees, it changes a bit. And so I'm sort of in that place where I have, like I said, projects out there, sort of seeing where that's landing, financially. And then again, as a creative, I am looking to just shoot some of my own stuff. To just stay active, stay busy, and stay creative.
Yeah. So that definitely answered a lot of those questions I was asking. Zach, Dylan, y'all got any questions for Ronnie and everything? I noticed y'all have been in the game for a while, and he's been doing it even longer. So he might have some answers to some of the things that y'all are trying to do. We're talking upstream. So I'm letting y'all ask my good buddy Ronnie any questions that y'all might have for him.
Yeah, right on. I actually have a bunch of questions. One, do you have any advice for two guys
Okay.
that are sitting on roughly 30 scripts and don't know what to do with them?
Wow. Well, first off, congratulations. Like, I don't care what anyone says, and you can maybe I'm biased, but I've worn all hats in this business, and the conclusion I've come to is a lot of people say money is king, but it's not. Content is king. I don't care what anyone says. Content is king. I've read a bunch of scripts in my life, and most of them are bad. So the reality of it is, if you have good scripts, then understand that that's valuable. That's very valuable. Now, of course, when you have these scripts, to you it doesn't mean a lot if you can't get them made. So I understand that part, and so that's the tough part. Now, let me ask you this question, because you said you have 30 scripts. What level of, are they all similar budgets? Are they, because they can all be, you have a $100 million script. You can also have a $5,000 script. So do you have scripts that are they written with budgets in mind, actors in mind? Are they movies that you need names? What kind of movies are you talking about? Are you talking about like, shorts, just independents?
Yeah. So what Dylan and I do?
Boundaries.
Yeah, we definitely hit all the boundaries. We try to make sure that when we're writing a new project that it's not something that we've done before. So we do a lot of short films. We do a lot of we have even series, like 8 episode series. We have like something as big as like a 20 episode series of something else. But everything that we've done so far has been under the guise of, we want to be able to do this at some point. So they're not written with a big budget in mind, because we want to do them. The problem is that we don't have the skills or the knowledge or the connections to get them made.
Okay, got it.
So like we definitely have written a script that, obviously like $100 million budget would have done this thing a lot of good, but for the most of it, they are small indie projects that are feature length, short length, or even something you could do as like a web series. But we don't have the knowledge and technical skills ourselves to actually create them, and we don't know what to do with them now.
Okay, got it. Okay, totally get it. Okay, so I'm going to tell you a couple of different things. I'm going to tell you something that's sort of like an umbrella, philosophical ideology. Hold on one second. Can you put the directions, because I'm not seeing them. You mind? Okay. Sorry. All right. So yes. So I'm gonna give you my ideology. Okay. And then I'll give you something more like sort of advice or whatever that's more pragmatic. But one thing I learned in this business is it is really all about relationships. It just. Oh, I'm totally off right here. Okay, it's all about relationships. Everything I've done, while the merit was definitely in the product. I created some really good products that I was able to or be a part of some really good products and scripts and ideas and such. But every single thing I've ever done had a relationship attached to it. And so what is my point? My point is make sure that you ingratiate yourselves in the community. Where do you guys live?
Boulder, Colorado.
Hello?
Yeah, we live in
Boulder.
Oh,
yeah, Boulder, Colorado.
Oh, that's a great place. Yeah. Okay, it's great. It's a great place. Money out there too, man. You guys need to go out there. I'm to raise some of that snow money. The rich folks that come and ski, see if they'll cut a couple of checks. But ingratiate yourself in the community, and because what happens is, and that's why I'm going to sort of lead myself to the pragmatic part. I'll give an example. So the last movie that I directed, we had a small budget. We had like $100,000, and so what I knew was that's not a lot of money. I mean, well, it depends on what you're doing, but it's still not a lot of money. The money can get spent really quickly, and so I told my buddy who had raised the money. He wrote the film as well. I said, look, man, what we need to do is find a production company. And even that came through a relationship. But partner with a production company that sees value in your product. And what that production company will do is they will provide you with resources. In our particular case, they provided us with locations. They owned a sound stage, and they provided us with some other resources as well, right? Some knowledge base, because one of the guys was a line producer. So we were able to hire, and they had done a few films. So now what they're able to do is hire on below the line talent, because here's the thing you always got to keep in mind. And this is what kind of sucks about this business, but it's also what's beautiful about it, is that no one has a job. Everyone's just sort of like job to job. So everyone, so while they have this job for this 8 weeks or 3 weeks or 4 weeks, or if you're lucky, 3 or 4 months, if you're doing some big project, you're looking for another job immediately. A lot of times you're halfway looking for a job while you're shooting. So the good thing is if you get with a production company that has all these relationships with the below the line people, they can get these people on, in a song and dance, because they're already giving them work. So if it's a production company, these are maybe doing 3 or 4 films a year, maybe 5 or 6 or other projects as well. It could be, because there are always people doing little small things, instruction videos and music videos, whatever the case may be. And so if this production company is hiring talent, they can get talent at a cost, right? So now what that does is it puts you in that same favor. So now you have that access because you're partnering with them, because you have the script, right? So what we did is, again, we partnered with the production company. They brought in some value. We also obviously had money. Then what I did is, one of the actors that we're going after, or we weren't going after, it's just a guy we knew. I knew he had a deal with a distributor that did this type of film. That distributed this type of film, and so we paid him to be lead. And so once he became the lead, that opened up our relationship with the distributor. And so once we got the film made, before the film was even made, it was distributed, right? We already had distribution, we had our money set up, and we made our money back immediately and our profit. So the thing is, what you have to do is you have to, again, unless you just come across an angel investor, which is always great, definitely, well, let me go back and rewind as well. Have you packaged any of them? Have you put together budgets and cast wish lists and all. Have you done any of that stuff? Let me start there.
No, we're just creative people that write a
Or
bunch
you just have the
and
script?
are looking for someone to show us what the next step should be.
Okay, I got it. No, I totally got it. Okay, so actually, I went too far ahead. The next step then is gather a package. Okay, and that package has to consist of obviously synopsis and the script and everything, but then it has to what is your projection? What's your target audience? What's your budget? What's your cast wish list? So you need to put a whole package together to sell the idea. You need a great tagline that says, that someone says when they look at this package, oh man, I can see this movie happening, because a lot of times I'm just giving you an example. They may see that you have, I'm just talking. They may see you have Taylor Swift as the lead, right? I mean, not that I don't know anything about Taylor Swift acting. I'm just saying. And they love Taylor Swift, and they're willing to walk with you down this road, because guess what they get to do? They get to say, I was the executive producer on a movie with Taylor Swift in it. So in other words, you need to market that package to investors. What is going to be sexy to an investor? And there's two different things. There's the promotable elements, which are your actors and your director, and then it's your financials, because you have different types of investors. You have literally people that will give you money. I have a friend of mine, a buddy of his, is super wealthy, oil guy, gave what's his name? Brody. Matt Brody. What's his name? Brody.
Adrian?
Adrian Brody. Gave Adrian Brody $30 million, bro. Film never came out. Adrian Brody gave him $30 million, man. Because he was enamored with him, and this guy's a billionaire. He gave him $30 million to shoot a film. I just asked my buddy recently. I said, "Did that film ever? The film never came out. I don't even know if it got shot. I don't know what happened." So you have those type of investors. And I'm not saying you're walking around with those type of people, but I'm saying you do have people that will give you money because they want to be involved with a production, right? So they'll say, "Oh, you have so and so. Oh, can you think you can get them?" And then you say, "Yes, of course I can get them. I just need the money." Right? Okay, wow. So, that's a way. They'll give you the money, right? That's one way. The other way is the financials. But typically, the only way to secure the possibility of strong financials is if you have promoted wellness, because that's how the game goes. If you don't have so on the film, and such, then it's not going to sell, because you got to understand that almost 70% of the money made by Hollywood film is from overseas. So now you got to understand, who means what in Spain and in Prague and in Germany and in Russia, and all in France. Everyone has thank you. Everyone has a price tag, all over the world. And so, and these people that are smart and understand, how they're going to make their money back, know that. So you need to make that. So the other side to it is, the other side to it is, when you're putting down this wish list, you need to make sure this wish list makes sense to, in other words, I'll take Eric Roberts. Eric Roberts is this guy. You guys all know who Eric Roberts is, right? Julia Roberts' brother. Mm-hmm. He's this guy that means $4,000 or $5,000 in Spain, and $3,000 or $4,000 in in Russia or whatever. So he gets all these little small films, right, that people are pre-packaging and selling. And that's the game at the end of the day. I mean, the real game of the independent filmmaker is getting a few of those guys in, and then maybe there's a little bit of gap financing that you could do, and leverage this, leverage some other kind of equity that you have, and sometimes without raising any money. But that's a whole nother lane to be in. But my point is, you have to think about, when you're putting your package together, you're having to think about what is the audience that you're selling to. You're not selling to me or Mark or or your friends or people out there in the world. You're selling to a certain type of person, and that's your investor. Who is that investor? Who are they? You need to do your research on who are they, what do they like, what do they find important. Thank you. So that's the first thing. The second thing you need to do is, again, like I said, immerse yourself in the technical world. So there are a bunch of young camera people out there and young directors and all, because understand what you have is the most important element. And everyone below the line that wants to be a successful camera person, or wants to be a successful DP, or a successful first AD, or a successful grip, any of those guys or girls, they can't do any of that if they don't have a script, right? So when you sort of immerse yourself in that community, I don't know how, I don't know whether it's join chat, I don't know, whatever that is, but it needs to be your local community in Boulder, Colorado.
Hey, Ronnie, just really quickly and everything.
A ton of support, man. I mean, when I say a ton of support, because with these, yeah.
The quick question I had for you and everything, and it actually related to that, but we have a show on here that airs on a regular basis. It's a guy out of California, Henry Morales, and he's always talking about California as being the epitome of everything. I don't know that I necessarily agree with him, because I actually think you can make good independent films anywhere in the country. So what are your thoughts? Do you think that you absolutely have to make it to LA in order to make it, or can you make it anywhere outside of the area? Because I know one of the things he's always talking about is trying to push people to the Hollywood mindset.
Anywhere you want, bro. Anywhere you want. Now, here's the trick, though. Here's where the problem comes. It's like I said, the promotable elements, most of them live in LA, right? Few of them live in New York. So a lot of times, and the best of your below the line people also live out here, right? But that's when we're talking about doing, $50 million Hollywood film. But if you're doing a small film, right, that you believe in, that you think is good, you think it's quality, you think it's a good story, then you can do it anywhere. And you can also, if you raise enough capital, you can fly someone in. If whomever it may be, you can also fly them in, and whoever that may be, because a ton of states, New Mexico is a great state, as an example. Michigan is another state. We know Georgia's another state that has it. A ton of states out there have really great incentives. They have rebates. They have tax breaks that investors find attractive. And that's another thing you can do. I don't know what Colorado has. I would imagine they have some kind of tax incentive, because I know you guys are a very clean, clean state, and that's a lot of what attracts, because Hollywood has a very green imprint. So a lot of states will support tax incentives and rebates because of that. So you should really find that out, like what kind of tax incentives that you have, and then you add that into your package. But absolutely, you can shoot anywhere. I mean, I absolutely. If you have a location, you got cameras. But what does it matter? The only thing is, like I said, it depends on what level you're doing. If you're doing something that you need, a certain name actor, then yeah, that may cost you a couple extra dollars, right? You have to convince them to come to your city, and you have to pay for them to stay there and stuff like that. But but that's not something that just, you can't overcome. That's not that big a deal. So you definitely don't have to be in LA. No, by no stretch of the imagination. But I think, again, immersing yourself in that community, because those guys don't only see, the thing is, when you get in that community, those guys don't only know, other camera guys and grips. And they know actors. They know directors. They know everybody because they shoot projects. They're always shooting projects, And people, and that's it.
Did Ronnie freeze up on us?
I think so.
Yeah. While we're waiting for Ronnie to come back, what are some of y'all's thoughts about what you've been hearing? And hopefully he'll come back into the conversation because it looks like he's frozen up on us and everything. But like I said, Ronnie's been in the industry for a while. That's why I wanted him to bring him on. And that's why I wanted to bring my Talking Upstream guys on so that y'all could meet him and learn what he's all about. So definitely, what are some of the thoughts of what you've been hearing?
Yeah, I mean, he obviously has a wealth of information that I don't have and would like to know. I could obviously talk to him and ask him questions all day. I mean, putting together a packet and trying to sell it, it's a good idea. The question I was about to ask him before he froze was if there was any benefit in trying to just sell a project with the hopes of making something, with that money. Because a lot of, unfortunately, a lot of what he's saying is if you're already in the circle, then you can meet more people. And that makes sense. We're trying to break into that circle, just to start. So I was actually really looking forward to continue the conversation with him. But I mean, that dude has a wealth of knowledge and I would like to pick his brain for a while. So
it's reassuring to hear that LA is not the only place you can do this. That's kind of the big takeaway I brought from that. And I remember living in Michigan. Unfortunately, Rick Snyder repealed the tax breaks back in, I think, 2016. So, another thing he's done to not very much ingratiate him, to me at least. But I know Georgia is really big on filming. Michigan is apparently trying to revive the tax breaks. The Michigan Film Office is apparently putting stuff in. Austin, Texas is a big movie place. And yeah, so it's nice to hear that LA is not the end-all be-all of locations.
Yeah. If you talk to him again, tell him if he needs an intern, I will more than happy work with him, for him.
Yeah.
If he wants to read some of our scripts, we would like to have him in contact. I mean, like he said, it's all about connections and networking, and I hope that we can kind of mark him down as a connection.
Well, like I said, I consider y'all part of my brotherhood and everything, so I've definitely got to know y'all through the network here and everything. So he's been a longtime friend, so definitely y'all could consider him as being accessed through me and everything, because definitely I have known him, as he said, for a number of years. So y'all can already count that as being done. So like I said, it's done and everything. So cool. I will definitely reach out to him. I know he's always open to having conversations with new people and things of that nature. So definitely I know that he's definitely like I said, we've known each other since probably it was the late 80s that we first met and everything when he was in college. So it's been a decades that we've known each other. So definitely can say that I can definitely continue to make that contact for y'all and everything. And I know that y'all said y'all got to run soon anyway. So I know that I will definitely be reaching out to him and we can continue this conversation. I've actually got another guest that'll be coming on very shortly. They'll be talking about some other issues within Mullings music and memories. So definitely I was glad that I was able to help make that contact between you, Zach, Dylan, and you and Ronnie earlier. So definitely I'll be talking to him on phone and we'll continue these conversations, and hopefully we'll also get him back on another episode and we'll be able to continue the conversation as well, because I know y'all got to go do what we all have to do, which is try to survive and make those donuts in order to try to pay those bills and all of that stuff. So definitely know that is going on. But I was glad, and like I said, I knew that it was taking us a minute to get everybody in place, but I definitely wanted the two of y'all, and I also sent out one to Brandon as well, because I know Brandon is part of the International Broadcast Media Network and is also involved in the film industry or TV industry, or has been in the past. So definitely I'm planning to bring Ronnie back into other conversations. Maybe next time he won't be in the car, but definitely I think we learned quite a bit, and we definitely heard some great stories about some of the things that he's been involved in and some of the folks he's involved with, like Ken Jeong, like Idris Elba, and a number of other folks that I've even heard y'all mention about on some of y'all shows. So I think that you can definitely help us get folks into being in place that we might be interested in, even for the some nobodies and for the whole Talking Upstream gang and everything.
Would love that. Absolutely love that. Whenever you need us, Marc, we're here. You know that.
Yeah.
I know that. Appreciate both of y'all.
Thank you very much, sir.
Let y'all bounce off and bring in VR Ferose, and we're going to talk a little bit something totally different away from the entertainment industry, but we're going to ready to focus on that until about the 7 o'clock hour, because I think he can only give me an hour as well. But I was glad that y'all were able to join and have this opportunity to meet Ronnie. And like I said, if I bring Ronnie back in on a future show, I'll definitely be having y'all come back in that as well.
Sounds
Awesome.
good.
Thank you, sir.
You have a
Great day.
Yeah, have a good one too. Cool. All right, so now I'm going to bring in VR Ferose and to the conversation. How are you doing and everything? I'm sorry, we were having a great conversation with a couple of friends of mine that are actually a longtime friend that has been involved in the Hollywood industry, and then two guys that are actually on the International Broadcast Media Network that are now engaged in that industry. So we were having a whole conversation about Hollywood and how things are going in Hollywood and all of that. But for those that are watching and don't know you and your background, and I know I reached out to you after seeing you on Shree, and you're involved in a number of things, I would love for you to share a little bit about your background as well, as we kind of pivot the conversation away from filmmaking into your world.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Marc. Am I clear and audible?
Yes, very much so.
Thank you. Firstly, thank you for inviting me. I was listening in to the last 15 minutes, found it very interesting. I have no understanding of the film world, but something that is super exciting. So I was tuning in. Thank you for inviting me. Maybe to quickly introduce myself, I work as a software executive. I'm a senior vice president at SAP, based in Palo Alto. So SAP, for people who don't know, is a global multinational. It's a German multinational, but $100 billion company with 100,000 employees around the world. I moved to the US 6 years back. I'm originally from India. And I moved here 6 years back. So I live right now in Cupertino, which is known as the headquarters of Apple. So right in the heart of Silicon Valley right now. And other than working as a software executive, which is kind of my day job, but really something that is my larger mission in life is to work in the area of disabilities, and that is one topic that I'm very passionate about, and I got involved in that because my son is on the autism spectrum, and that kind of I had no understanding of the world of disabilities, but that got me involved in that. So that's kind of my I would say my passion project, not a project, but really a mission for life, is to really see how using technology and other means we can make a meaningful difference to that community. I'm also an author and a columnist, so I write columns for Forbes, for a couple of publications in India called Indian Express and Mint. So yeah, I juggle multiple different tasks, Marc. So that's a very quick introduction of mine.
I appreciate it, and definitely one of the shows that we do here is a young lady, Wynn does a show about enabling people that have disabilities as well as women. She is a young lady and everything, but she's actually got cerebral palsy, and definitely she doesn't let that stop her from doing her podcast both here as well as they first discovered her when she was doing the more traditional radio version of podcasting and things along that line, and she was truly amazing and is still doing some truly amazing stuff for us. I think she had set a goal of something like 60,000 downloads when she first got into podcasting, and she made that, and now she's trying to do, I think, something like 400 on a regular basis. So she's definitely continuing to build her audience and is definitely not letting the disability stop her and things of that nature. But I know we've had some other folks that have been in that field, and sometimes it's interesting to hearing them talk about the different styles of disability, because sometimes folks are engaged in different ways and things along that line. So I would love to hear more of your thoughts of what you learned about disability and some of the things in that regards.
Yeah, maybe I'll kind of quickly rewind to give everybody a perspective of my journey and from my vantage point, what I saw as, the big challenges in the disability space and how we were trying to make a small difference in whatever capacity we can. So my son, who is now 11 years old, he was He was diagnosed with autism when he was 18 months, so almost 10 years back. And like every parent, I went through my motions of denial and anger before acceptance came in. And for me, the big first few months were really about trying to understand what is autism and trying to understand the disability space itself. And you have to understand that I was based in India at that time. I'm talking about 2010. And India is in many ways, I would say almost 20 years behind the US in terms of awareness, in terms of the disability rights movement itself. I would say America had such a fantastic disability rights movement. The ADA, the American Disability Rights, made it possible to really mainstream people with disabilities in, whether it's education or employment and other areas. So for me, I was starting with people looking at disability as a taboo topic. People didn't speak about it. People didn't, it was not out in the open. And just to give you some data points, in India, the World Health Organization, as per that, 15% of the world's population has some form of disability. Whereas in India, when they looked at the data, it was 2%. Now, that doesn't mean that India has less number of people with disabilities. That's not true. It's just that people don't talk about it. So those numbers are not there. So that's the starting point. We don't even have the data because people don't speak about it and people are not open about having a disability. So my first big challenge when I started working in the disability space was to really change the narrative, which means instead of seeing it as a taboo topic that nobody spoke about, really to bring it front and center, to make it absolutely okay that people with disabilities have the same, wishes and dignity as anybody else. They also want to contribute to the society in a meaningful manner. How do you bring and drive that change in the society was really one of the big missions of my life. The second thing, which was obviously, I think, still a big challenge, is how do you provide meaningful employment for people with disabilities? If you look at the data today around the world, I would say 95% of people with disabilities are not meaningfully employed. I mean, they do some work in these, as a pastime, but are they part of the, mainstream economy? That's something which is still, I think, way behind. And when I looked at autism specifically, I realized that people on the autism spectrum are never employed in any meaningful manner. And the reason is pretty simple. People on the autism spectrum have they have some social challenges. They don't socialize. They like to be on their own. And the second reason is that their communication skills are pretty limited. And so these are two fundamental skills that every job interview is looking for. One is good communication skills and the ability to work in teams.
Right.
And when you look at people on the autism spectrum, they do not like to socialize, so they can't work in teams. And the second is their communication skills are very limited. My son, for example, is completely nonverbal, so he can't speak. Now, in the absence of two of the most important skills that every job interview looks for, how do you make people on the spectrum employed? That's the big challenge that you're facing. And it's not that they are not gifted. They are very gifted in certain specific areas and they have certain great skills, but most of them are not able to go through a job interview and find a job. So that's the biggest challenge, especially for people on the autism spectrum, to find a job that can keep them employed. And that's something that I worry about every day, right? What does my son do when he grows up? Will he be fully independent or will he be fully dependent on us? And so that was really a big challenge that I was trying to look into, Marc.
Because one of the other things I was curious about is I've actually worked with a testing company. It's a grading company that grades like end of the year school tests. And one of our best readers actually falls on that autism spectrum. But sometimes he runs into issues. He's actually, like I said, probably one of the better readers in my mind in terms of like actually his skill set and things of that nature. But sometimes he does have issues around boundaries and like the exercise and what those boundaries are and how to deal with those boundaries. So that does become an issue sometimes, is dealing with boundaries and the things of that nature. So is that something that you've also found out in your research and everything? Because I know one of the other things that he's really good at without naming the person, but as anybody that's watching it knows me, knows probably who I'm talking about. But he falls into that kind of that Rain Man spectrum of
Yeah.
autism. Like he's very good at like knowing statistics and things of that nature. Like he can quote, I think he's a big fan of like minor league baseball and some of the other smaller sports, and he'll give you like all these figures, and you're sitting there going like, I wish I knew that kind of information just off the top of my head, but I don't. So, like I said, I know he falls in that spectrum, and he'll rattle off statistics about small colleges and minor league baseball and other stuff. So that's just kind of my own personal involvements with this particular gentleman. I know some other people that fall in that autism spectrum, but I was just wondering, the bigger question I was asking you is boundaries something that you have to even work with your son on?
Yeah. In fact, what we did, and this is something which eventually became a very famous Harvard case study, what I had started way back in India, is that what we realized is instead of looking at what people cannot do, let's focus on what people can do, right? And so I said, why do you look at people on the spectrum and say these are the things they cannot do, but let's look at their abilities instead of the disabilities? And what we realized at that point was there was a Danish company which had hired only people on the autism spectrum, but they were doing very specific tasks. For example, they were doing software testing, exactly like you said, Mark. And once you gave them specific tasks and gave them clear guidance and had people to manage them and made some adjustments, because companies have to make those adjustments, they were actually able to run a fully for-profit company, which was doing extremely well. So in this company, there were 100 employees, of which 80 of them were on the spectrum, and 20 of them were so-called neurotypical, who managed these employees. And they were able to produce even better outcome than other companies. And so when I looked at that, so I actually went to Denmark, did research on that company, and I came back and hired 3 employees on the autism spectrum in India. And everybody said, Ferose, you're stupid. This is, how will this ever work? And because they didn't have college degrees, they kind of knew how to work on an internet and browse the stuff. But what we did was we not only we hired these 3 employees, trained them over 6 months on specific tasks with clear guidelines and clear checkpoints as to what needs to be done. And then over the next 1 year, we found that these employees were better than my engineers. And that was a great aha moment for us, that if you train people for their strengths and ensure that you make some adjustments, because they had multiple issues. For example, they couldn't go to an employee cafeteria because it was too loud for them. So sometimes we had to get them food in their table so that they can work in an environment which was conducive. Sometimes many of them needed their own rooms because they found working with 10 other people around them, they had a huge cognitive overload. So they were not able to filter out the noises. So many of these employees, we made adjustments where we gave them specific rooms and said, you sit here and work. And we found that over a period of time that they were able to produce outcomes which were better than some of my best engineers. Right. And that led to SAP making one of probably the most landmark announcement in the disability sector by any corporate in 2013. SAP said we'll hire 1% of a global workforce with people on the autism spectrum. So we were 65,000 employees. Then we said we'll hire 650 employees with people on the spectrum, because we were not doing charity. We found that it made business sense. Right. It was good for the company to hire people on the spectrum because they were producing better outcomes than other engineers. And very interestingly, the tech world is a highly competitive world and people have high attrition rates, whereas these employees were extremely loyal to the company. They would never quit. We still have 97 to 98% of the people whom we have hired are still with the company. So we found that it made a lot of business sense to hire people on the autism spectrum. In fact, it became such a massive movement that many companies now have a similar version of the Autism at Work program, whether it's JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs, Microsoft, you name it. And in 2016, what I had started as a very simple project based out of India became such a global movement that it's now a Harvard case study.
Wow. Because one of the things I was even wondering about autism and everything is I'm thinking that in some ways, autism folks that are going through the different spectrums within the autism spectrum, that they might even do better with what's going on in this global pandemic. Because I do know that within that autism spectrum is some folks that also have like some things where they were already doing compulsive behaviors, like washing their hands and things of that nature all the time anyway. So they were already doing that. And that's what they're telling all of us to do now. So there were some folks who were already engaged in that behavior even before the pandemic forced us all to gain that behavior.
Oh, absolutely. In fact, we've done a lot of studies and data, and I can tell you from my own personal experience. So for my son, who's now 11 years old, in fact, the last 6 to 9 months has been the best for him academically. And the reasons are pretty simple. Number one, he's finding himself in a safe environment. So he has no anxiety issues. He's not going to a school, he's not going to new topics, he doesn't have to catch a bus and so on. I'm not saying that those are not required. I'm just saying that in the current environment, he's feeling safe because his parents are all the time at home. That's number one. Number two, because there are no distractions, he's very focused on what he needs to do. So what data and what is very interesting is that for many people, the pandemic has been a blessing in disguise because they are able to work in the environment that they're most comfortable. And they don't like socializing. They like to be on their own. So this is a classic example when we talk about we are struggling with social distancing. They don't. People on the autism spectrum is like, wow, this is like perfect for me. I don't have to socialize. This is like, this is game on, right? So for some people, this is their natural setting. We are struggling with it, but they are not. And so again, there was an interesting data which showed that in the pandemic, the introverts are performing way better than the extroverts. Because the extroverts love to be with people. The introverts don't. And now their introverts are like, you know what, I can be at my home and, I can talk when I have to, but I don't have to show off and I don't have to raise my hands and prove myself. I'm fine being in the background, but I'll get my job done, right? So I think the pandemic has, gets sometimes the best out of people whom you least expect. So in our case, it seems to have worked. And I'm more worried about when it reopens, my son is going to struggle to get back to a school.
Right.
That's my bigger worry.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I do know that they are talking about with the vaccine and things reopening. And so how will you adjust with that? How will you manage to try to incorporate him into that world whenever that world does reopen? Now, they're saying that in some cases that might be 6 months to a year or maybe even a couple of years until we're actually at that point. But whenever that point arises, how are you and your family looking at trying to find ways to get him back into the mainstream society, for lack of a better term?
Yeah, I think, most of the children on the spectrum, and I'm only speaking from my own experience, and I don't want to generalize it, but, you need to do that very gradually, right? You can't do it, okay, tomorrow we have to get back to school. And for many of them, it is the pattern which is important. So as soon as you break the pattern, they become very anxious. And so the thing is to keep them informed and explain to them and do it very gradually. So assuming if the school is reopening in a month's time, we have to keep building that up and informing them that after 3 weeks, you have to get back to school, then the school bus will come. Do the practice, do it gradually so that it's not sudden. And the other thing, especially for non-verbal children, we sometimes underestimate the fact that you have to inform them. Sometimes we just don't tell them because we assume they can't talk, so they don't understand, which is not true at all. Imagine if you hadn't told them that tomorrow morning 8 o'clock you have to go to school and the school bus will come, and you just wake him up and put him on a bus. He's going to have a huge tantrum. So you have to keep informing them and telling them before you make that transition. So transitions are typically very hard for some of these people. And by the way, it's hard for us as well. Right? Imagine I've been now working from home for 9 months and suddenly I have to go back to work. It's not going to be easy. Of course, we are able to make those adjustments, but special needs children, I think, require that much extra effort to allow them to adjust to the new world.
Yeah. And what are some of the things that you've brought from your work world into your passion project of autism? Because I'm imagining that there are some things that you're learning even out of the computer world that you're able to help even with the things that you're trying to learn from your passion project within autism. And I'm sure that our global audience would love to learn about some of these innovations. I know that one of my fellow hosts and everything is always talking about innovations and how they're doing a lot of great things in our society. So I'd love to hear your
Yeah.
thoughts on that.
So I think, you know, one of the things that I say is that it's not, what I learn from the corporate world that I bring to my, nonprofit world or the other way around. I believe that magic really happens at the intersection of multiple things, right? So, for example, what I can say that what we can all learn from the corporate world is really the ability to focus on a problem and solve it at scale. Large companies manage to achieve scale. As I said, SAP is $100 billion company. It has massive impact around the world. Now that's what we can learn from the corporates. What can we learn from the nonprofit world is the empathy factor in the people, right? People are empathetic. They keep the purpose at the center, whereas corporates keep profits at the center. And I'm not saying one is right or the other is wrong. All I'm saying is really magic happens when these two intersect. So you can learn certain, the idea of empathy and purpose from the from the nonprofit world,
Right.
and the nonprofit world can learn about how to have massive scalable impact. So there is a learning that happens in both these areas. And the last thing, which is also very important, is not just us two, is really the government, right? I always say that if you want to have an impact at scale, involve the government, because they have the maximum reach.
Right.
Corporates have a specific reach in their customer base, but governments have a reach that touches everybody. So if you're really looking at changing something at a massive country, across the country scale, I think it happens at the intersection of nonprofits, corporates, and governments. And so you can learn from each other specific things that are mutually beneficial.
And how do you think, because that's a conversation that has actually come up on this network a couple of times, but how do you think the government is doing, even in terms of the way of handling various disabilities, including autism? I have a personal opinion, but I'd love to hear your opinion as to how you think we're doing in terms of reaching these kind of communities that are out there and whether we can do better in what we're doing.
So my learning, Mark, has been that each of these, now let me look at these three dimensions: government, corporate, and say nonprofits, right? They all optimize for very different outcomes. The corporates optimize for profit. So everything they do is, if I'm making profit, I will do it. If I'm not making profit, I'm not going to do it, right? Nonprofits, they optimize for impact. They'll say, am I able to feed 1,000 people? If I'm able to do that, that's where I'm going to put the money, or whatever my purpose is, am I optimizing for that? Governments, unfortunately, optimize for votes. I mean, they are only interested in, will I get the votes that will eventually give me the power? So they optimize for power, right? Now, and all three of them are sometimes pulling in three different directions. Now, the big challenge is to find something that is meaningful for all the three. And that is the hard problem to solve. Now, let me give you an example. And I've been doing a lot of research on large scale social movements. And one of the things I was trying to understand is, why has there not been a large scale movement around disabilities, for example? I mean, the American Disabilities Act happened thanks to many great activists who worked on it. But where is disability in the agenda of any government, whether it's Republican or Democrat or in India, doesn't matter. It doesn't figure in the top most important activities. I know, people are now speaking about healthcare and disabilities and, health conditions and so on. But if you change that narrative and try to spin it not spin it, but really bring a very different perspective, then you can drive change. For example, when I say 15% of the world's population are people with disabilities, let's understand that's the largest minority in the world. The largest minority in the world is people with disabilities, because that's 15%. That's as per the World Health Organization. Now, you have to understand that every person with disability has a direct impact on at least 4 family members directly. which means the parents are affected, the siblings are affected at the bare minimum, right? So if my son is disabled, it affects my life, it affects my wife's life, it affects his my parents' life and his or her nearby siblings. Now that's where you can use that and change the narrative, which means you can say, why is disability not important when it affects not 15 but 15 into 4, 60% of the world's population?
Well, well. Yeah, you're right. Because a lot of times folks don't even think about the fact of many of us have a disability of one form or another. I know that even on this platform, I've talked about the fact that I have a form of dyslexia called dysgraphia. It means that like it takes a little bit longer for me to figure out left versus right than the average
Yeah.
person. Part of the reason I don't drive and things of that nature. So I would fall in that category of those with disability. But if the average person just walking, seeing me in
Yeah.
passing, they probably would not know that.
Absolutely. So I think I always say that, disability affects everybody at some point in their life.
Right.
It affects all of us. My father had a knee surgery last year. So he was on a wheelchair for 2 months. Now it's a temporary condition, but it affects you.
Right.
Mark, I see you are wearing spectacles, right? Specs.
Right.
If I
Right.
remove that, you will be blind.
Right.
Probably, I don't know. So it affects all of us. It's just that we, thanks to technology and the progress we have made, we are able to overcome some of our disabilities in a meaningful manner. So the fact that everybody at some point in their life is going to get affected is a reality,
Right.
right? I always say, if nothing else, you will become 100% disabled when you die anyway.
That's true. That's very true.
You won't add to the economy at that time, but what I'm saying is it affects all of us. And so there is a moral responsibility to make a difference because it's going to affect you
Right.
at some point or the other, right? So if you're going to be on a wheelchair, as well make the places accessible so that you will have a better life. So unfortunately, people think that disability happens to somebody else. No, it happens to everyone.
Yeah, it definitely happens to everybody. You're right. We're all going to face a disability at one time or another, no matter how healthy you are. I even think about some of those great athletes of all sports. I don't care whether it's like a sport that's very popular in India, cricket, or
Yeah.
something that's more like America, like
Yeah.
American football. They oftentimes you find them, one getting injured when they're doing the sports, but also even if they've had a completely healthy, and I don't know anybody that did that, but if they had a fairly healthy career, by the time they get into the real world, as we like to call it, if they're leaving sports, there are a lot of times those things that they were exercising start deteriorating and they start being impacted by that. Because I can't talk about how many times you've heard about the football player that is walking around, with bad knees and other things because of that physical exercise that they were doing when they were playing professional football.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's what I'm saying. It happens to everyone. So there is a moral responsibility to make it better because you are going to get benefited out of it.
Yeah, one of the things one of our folks was saying from the network was disability is not always seen either. So we're talking about what we were talking about, that sometimes you don't even see the disabilities that folks have because sometimes they are things that are
Yeah.
unseen. We're talking about some of the things that folks see.
And that's a big I mean, if you meet my son, he can pass off as an absolutely normal kid because he can walk and he can run. He can't speak and he has other challenges, but when you see him, you don't understand that he has a problem. The other problem that I've figured out, Mark, is that our narrative around disability is physical disability, right? If you want to show that, if you want to go to a disabled parking, for example, what is the photograph that you see? You see a person on a wheelchair, right? But data shows that only 15% of the world's disabled population has anything to do with wheelchair.
Wow.
But our thinking is disability means you have to be on a wheelchair. In fact, there's a funny instance by my friend who's visually impaired. He went to the airport and he said, I'm visually impaired, and can you help me get to the boarding gate? And they said, oh, I'll send you. I'll give you a wheelchair. He said, no, I can walk. I have no problem walking. I don't need a wheelchair. I just need somebody to help me get to the boarding gate. And so
Right.
people just don't understand that. And look at our narrative, look at our representation of any form of disability is a wheelchair, but it's only 15% of the disabled population who actually need one.
Wow. Yeah, that's very true. And another thing that I know that you're very passionate about, and I'd love to hear you talk about that as well. And I definitely, we might come back to some of the disability issues as well. But that you are also the head of the SAP Academy for Engineering. And one of their things is trying to get more folks involved in engineering. And I imagine more folks from the minority community. You do come out of
Yeah.
India and things of that nature. And I know that a friend of mine who was on one of our previous shows, she has that program called STEM Gems, where she's trying to get more women, and particularly women of color, involved in fields like engineering and things of that nature. So tell us a little bit about what the SAP Academy for Engineering is and some of the ways that you're trying to get more folks involved in this field that unfortunately I feel does not have enough minority representation. And I know it doesn't have enough women representation.
Oh, very, very good question. So one of our core, I was asked by the CEO to build this academy for engineering here in the Bay Area, and we started this just 1.5 years back, and our whole objective, Mark, was to to build what we call as a multidimensional engineer. And let me explain that a little bit as to what does a multidimensional engineer mean. What we've realized is that the best engineers are the ones who are at the intersection of science and humanities, right? Our best engineers across the world, and whether you look at Steve Jobs or Elon Musk or anybody, they have always said it's not just about science, it's not just about technology, it's not just about coding, but your understanding of humanities is equally important for you to not just innovate and build great products, but really to drive change across the society. And unfortunately, we have seen that it got heavily skewed to technology only. And our whole thinking that, okay, only men can do science and technology, which is so completely flawed. But that's the narrative we all lived with. I mean, if you just look at data, I mean, look at all the CEOs around the world, maybe a decade ago. In fact, venture capitalists never invested in companies which was led by women.
Wow.
Right? And so, of course, that narrative has changed now, and it is changing, but it will take some time. So some of the things that we wanted to do was the following. The first was, while science is important, art and humanities is also equally important. That's number one. So you kind of you're building the right side of your brain and the left side of your brain. The second thing is, of course, to be as diverse as possible. And diversity is not just gender, and people just assume diversity is gender. I said, diversity of abilities, exactly what we showed, that when you hire people with disabilities, it's good for innovation. It's just not good for, it's not just about PR and wanting to look good, but it's really good for a business perspective. So how do you curate content and problems in a way that we really bring a diverse mix of people together has been at the forefront of what we do. So one of the things that we do, every batch of engineers who come to the academy, it's a clear 50-50 men and female. If you have a batch of 60 engineers who come, we always make sure there are 30 women and 30 men. And that never happened before, and sometimes people are surprised to see 50% women in an engineering academy, because they're so used to seeing men only. And we found that, there is absolutely no evidence to show that women are any less. In fact, most of the times they're as good or even better than the men. And it increases the innovation, it improves the collaboration. And so it's not just about gender, but really to bring different abilities, different cultures together to make it a much better place. So that's one of our big ideas, to be at the forefront of change across across the country.
And speaking of being at the forefront of change, and by the way, one of our founders who is actually in the engineering field, and I think she said she was doing her physical therapy today, but she said that she was giving you the way to go symbol, because she has actually got an engineering background herself and everything. So she's definitely a big fan of that, and was definitely glad that you were providing equal opportunity through the academy and everything along those lines. One of the things that I was curious about that I was going to ask you is, I sometimes feel that, and you alluded to it earlier, that too many of our corporations have gotten away from the humanitarian base of what they should do. I've always been a big fan of corporations that both have the bottom line, but also have a humanitarian interest as well. In your mind, as one that's out there in the West Coast and is probably talking to a number of folks in that space, whether that's Apple, whether that's folks that are connected to Tesla or a number of other places. How can we get more people to have that mindset in the corporate world or just in corporations in general, whether it's small corporations or big corporations? But what are some of the ways that you think that we as a people can push our corporations to do more of this kind of work?
So, there's a beautiful saying which says that what gets measured gets done. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So if you look at what gets measured, what is the success criteria for a corporation? It's only profits. It's quarterly results. Every company has to, the stock price goes up and down based on your quarterly results. So if you have a good quarterly result, which is nothing but profits, your stock price goes up. And if you're only measuring profits, well, people will only optimize for that. And that's pretty simple. And I think we cannot just optimize for profits, because then that would lead to disastrous consequences, right? I mean, you could argue, is Facebook, has they done more good to the world or bad? I don't know, but you can debate that and argue about it. And I keep saying, as I said, I don't know enough about American democracy. I've been here just 5 or 6 years but the two pillars of American democracy is a free media, and is the ability to tell the truth, and the ability to vote, right? I mean, these are the pillars on which every democracy stands. Now you look at where we are today. Today we are talking about, is this vote real or fictional? We don't know. Look at media. We don't know. We are not able to differentiate between what is real news and fake news. We live in an extremely polarized world. Now, you can always argue, did technology do good or bad?
Good point, because I can see where folks might see both the bad about technology as well as some of the worst parts of technology as well.
Yeah.
I mean, I would argue that it's probably done more good than it's done bad, but
yeah,
I can see where folks might have that opposite argument.
absolutely. So again, I don't have an answer to that, but I'm saying let's look at it holistically, right? And the reason is pretty simple, because corporates are just incentivized to maximize profits at the cost of everything else. And here is where, I've been a student of, Gandhi for 2 decades now. I've been studying his style. And one of the things that Gandhi said it very beautifully is that the purity of the means is more important than the outcome.
Mm.
If the way to achieve your profits is not pure, it just doesn't help. It's like saying, oh, I run a tobacco company, and then but then I also run a cancer hospital. Well, it just doesn't help, right? I mean, you are the root cause of creating cancer, and now you say I'm doing non-profit work in building cancer hospitals. So they are in conflict with each other. You can't say I will make profits at all costs and then I'll give away some amount of money to fix the problem. No, that's not true. So Gandhi's whole philosophy was purity of means matter.
Yeah.
How you make your profits is probably more important than the profits itself. Because if you achieve the wrong methods to achieving the profits, you're going to create more problems.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I've always been a strong proponent of some of the most of the philosophies, if not all of the philosophies of Gandhi and everything. And one of the things that I've always been curious about, and we've actually had some spiritual shows that air here on this network and everything, is I've always been of the belief, and I was wondering if you would share this same thought, that most of the world religions, I don't care whether they're Eastern or Western, have the same basic tenets of what we want, meaning that we want good support of our family, like honoring our elders and things of that nature.
Yeah.
We want a roof underneath on top of our head, and very much those kind of tenets. Where I think we get lost at is that sometimes the extreme elements of any religion, whether that's Eastern or Western, kind of like get away from that argument and everything. But I would argue that all of the religions have the same basic tenets. Would you agree with me on that?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I've been very fortunate to have, I'm a Muslim, just so that I'm a Muslim. My wife is a Hindu, so I married a Hindu. People said that's the perfect recipe for disaster, right? I've studied, the Gita. I've read the Quran. I've read Buddhism, and almost all of them say the same things. I mean, it's just people interpret it very differently. But fundamentally, I think the way I see as a difference between maybe the East and the West, and the reason I'm trying to tell you this is because I've been fortunate to live both lives. I've spent some time in East, and I've spent the last few years in the West. I've also spent enough time in Europe. Is this that the Eastern society is a very interdependent society?
Mm-hmm.
The Western society is a very independent society.
Right.
In the West, it's the individual that's important. In the East, it's the collective that's more important. If you ask me what's the difference between the East and the Western philosophies, that's it. I mean, I'm talking about an 80,000 feet level. Lee Kuan Yew, who was the prime minister of Singapore, one of the iconic prime ministers, and he was asked once, I think by an American president, said, what do you think is the difference between the East and the West? And he just gave this very simple answer. He said, in the East, the collective is more important than the individual. In the West, the individual is more important than the collective, right? And my belief is any of these philosophies taken to extreme is bad.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right? I think it was Plato who said that the end of democracy is tyranny.
Right. Yep, that makes a lot of sense. And by the way, Kimberly was watching and making some different comments and everything. She was saying that it was part of the reason, because I'd asked her to pop in, but she wasn't able to do it, is that she's disabled and is having to do her therapy every day, but she's watching me while she's doing her required workout and all of that. But then she had a question for you as well, and it's actually in your line of field and everything, but she wants to know, do you think that will ever overstep our boundaries to humans with some AI? So if not, why not? And I think that that's one of the things that she's curious about is AI and whether we can overstep those boundaries.
Very good question. Very good questions. And I'll have two. I mean, I've been very concerned about this and I've written extensively about it as well. In fact, Kimberly, you could read one of my articles about Gandhi and AI. I said, if Gandhi was alive today, what would his take has been for artificial intelligence? And let me kind of give you two perspectives of that. The first is any technology that's not understood by people, large corporates will optimize it for their profits, right? I am a technologist, and I can tell you 99.999% of the people in the world have no understanding of AI, no understanding. And anything that's not understood by a majority of the people, somebody is going to misuse it to optimize for profits. And that's my first fear, that how do you make sure that AI is understood by people? Because once people understand, you can't misuse it.
Right.
Let's very simply give the example of social media, right? Why is social media so pervasive? But it's also one thing that nobody understands, because nobody understands how it works. People say, "Oh, I'm doing a tweet and I'm on LinkedIn," but really nobody understands. People assume it's free. I always say, anything that is free, you are the product.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And as soon as people don't understand, all these tech companies are going to maximize for their profit. Very simple. They don't care what happens to you, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's the number one problem with AI, that if people don't understand it, somebody is going to maximize it for their benefit. Now that's the not so good story, and there's enough written about it. And I'm concerned that unless we self-regulate, because the governments don't understand AI either, so they can't regulate because they don't understand it. I mean, I sometimes listen to all the CEOs being questioned at the Senate by the senators who have no clue of it, no understanding of technology. Somebody's written a note and they're asking that question, but they have no understanding. And you can get away by saying whatever you want. So that's the number one problem that I see. Here is the good news. The good news is that history also shows that human beings are capable of doing the right things when it matters the most.
Right.
Now let's understand, we can as a civilization blow up the world 1,000,000 times the size of Earth by the press of a button.
Right.
Okay, we have more nuclear power than 1,000,000 Hiroshima and Nagasaki's, but we haven't done that since 1945. We have, somehow the world has come together and say we are never going to use this again. So there has been some element of deep consciousness that people have avoided to have yet another nuclear attack. Right? I'm not saying that's a proof that it will never happen in the future, but it shows that humanity can come together for doing the right things when the need arises. So I'm also pretty confident that climate change is the next big challenge, and I'm pretty confident that human beings can come together to do the right things. Though at times we can get demotivated and not see too much progress in it, and that's where I believe that the younger generation are the ones who are going to drive the change, because many of the people in politics have no incentive to do the right things.
Right.
Younger people have all the incentives to do the right things because they want to live in a world that's meaningful and that they can enjoy, and they can see their children and grandchildren. These, the people who are at the fag end of their careers have no incentive to do the right thing. So I think there is an inherent goodness in people that comes out to do the right things, but you have to be careful that if you try to optimize for one metric, you can screw up the other metrics.
No, I definitely would agree with that and everything. One of the things that I was curious about, we're actually hosting a conference on the International Broadcast Media Television Network, which is the World Leader Summit. And I know that they've been talking about both Bitcoins and cryptocurrencies. And I know some folks are a little bit cautious about that because of technology and things of that nature. I was wondering your take on that. And then Kimberly's got a couple of questions that I'll put on the screen as well around quantum computing. But I was wondering what your take is about technology and some of the currencies that are coming out of technology.
So, at a very fundamental level, some of these technologies are extremely disruptive, and it's only a matter of time when some of these things will become a reality. So you have to really look at what is these technologies going to do, right? It's like if you ask me today, if I have to transfer $10 to you, Mark, why should I need a bank account? I can just do it with a WhatsApp message. I can just do it I don't need a mediator. I can just do it directly between you and me with absolutely no bank required, right? So the role of a bank can be questioned. Why is a bank required in the first place? Why should if I have to transfer money to my parents in India, I have to pay, it takes 3 days and it takes maybe $100. I have to give to the middleman, which is nothing but the bank, right? So there is a fundamental truth which is about delayering. Technology works to reduce layers. That's the role of technology. That's it.
Well,
So the one role of technology is to remove the intermediate steps and the layers. If any technology that removes the layers will work, it's only a matter of time, and it's only a matter of how cheap it is. A lot of these cryptocurrencies and all these technologies are still at its initial stages, so people don't understand it. But remember, if it is making it easy and it's removing the middlemen, it will eventually happen, right? It's like you and me. I've never met Marc in person, but I'm having this 1 hour conversation. I don't have to drive all the way to wherever Marc is to have a conversation. So what has technology done? It's just remove all the layers, and it's made it cheaper. Any technology which will achieve that will always be successful.
Yep, good. Like you said, we're having a conversation literally across the coast, because I know you're in Palo Alto, California. I'm actually in Durham, North Carolina. So we're actually east to west coast and doing that using technology. And Kimberly was asking, is actually the questions are related. So I actually put both of them on there, read them, and then you can answer them both because they're kind of related to each other. But she was asking, do you believe that quantum computing is necessary? And then along those same lines, she was asking, what would you do? Let me put that back up there because it was actually up. What would you do if quantum computing, if you had access to it? That was the question.
Yeah, I mean, firstly, I don't really know much about quantum computing, so I really don't have hands-on knowledge, but I've kind of read a few things here and there. The way I see technology is that if it helps the marginalized, I think that's probably the biggest benefit of any form of technology, right? If it's able to democratize the world I think any form of technology is good. Internet, I mean, Vint Cerf was the father of the internet, is a very dear friend of mine. The internet, the first thing that he did 50 years ago, and if you ask him, is internet good or bad? He will say, yeah, there are some negative consequences of it, but overall, it had a very positive impact, right? And the reason is it's very easy for the marginalized communities to get involved and be part of the larger change. So if I'm on a wheelchair, this is perfect because I don't have to travel to meet someone. I can do it online. So I think any form of technology, whether it's quantum computing or bitcoins, if it provides access to the marginalized community, and if that includes them in that journey, I think it is good. But the reality is that even technology takes time to distribute around the world. I mean, just to give you a data, we all talk about being able to work from home. The reality is 50% of the world or children in the world have no access to internet.
Right.
They are not able to study. They are sitting at home and with no access to education. So you may say, wow, we think everybody has an internet connection. No, it's not. So some of these technologies doesn't achieve its end objective unless it is available for a few years. Internet is there for 50 years now, but it's, even though we have 50 years in, 50% of the world's population or children have no access to internet, right? So I think I would say quantum computing is good, but we haven't seen the real benefits of it, and that's okay because that's how technology starts. Few people understand it, but as soon as it becomes viable, then it becomes available for more and more people.
I guess that's one of my concerns, even about kind of the ways that we want to go into space, and they're starting the space travel mission again and everything as well. That sounds great, and we might even need to go up in space if we keep on destroying some of the things that we're doing here on the world and everything. But my concern is that those price points aren't exactly inexpensive, because I've seen a couple of articles as how much it costs to go on one of those flights. So if we take folks up there, will the poor people, and even I would argue the middle class folks, be able to go on this trip? Because it sounds to me like it's only going to be available for the rich, because right now the price points are very high. And even if it becomes like the airline industry and the price points come down, I don't know that they're ever going to come down to like even cruise ship levels and everything of that nature, at least not immediately. Maybe some decades or centuries down the line, they might be able that you can fly up to the moon or fly up to Mars or Venus at the same price that you would go to from here to India or here to South Africa. But I just don't see that happening for centuries.
So I think the way I see it is that every technology breakthrough starts with a certain objective, but we should never underestimate the secondary effects of some of these breakthroughs, right? So while the objective of going to the moon is not just to have people actually travel to moon, but maybe there is the satellites and the internets all work because of some of those breakthrough technologies. And I agree with you. I don't see space travel ever becoming viable for regular people. I think it's just far away. I mean, we haven't even made flights viable for people. I mean, that's the reality of the world. You and me can fly, but let's understand 80% of the people have never gone on a flight till date, right? So we still talking about at least decades, if not centuries, before all of these happens. But as I said, the secondary effects of some of these technology breakthroughs could sometimes be more important than the primary breakthroughs. The idea is not to do space tourism, but maybe something else will happen because people can go to space, and that may be more significant than the primary one. My primary concern right now, especially in the times that we live in, is that the pandemic has really exposed us to fundamental challenges in our society of inequality, right? And I think the rich is becoming richer, the poor is becoming poorer. I mean, let's look at how the stock market is. The stock market is at the highest ever in its history today.
Right.
How can you explain that? When we are going through the worst economic recession, we are on the verge of a depression, and most people are struggling to have a 1 square meal a day, but the stock market is at the highest. How do you explain that? And that's where I see that what the biggest challenge that we are going to face as a society today is massive inequality, and almost disappearing middle class.
And that's why it's interesting that you bring that up because I know that we do a show here called Economics Monday, and one of the other founders, Nick Palvedo, was having a big conversation with Shaquille Latimer, who is a gentleman out of, I believe, Australia, if I remember correctly. But their whole conversation was around what you're talking about around economy and things of that nature. Because definitely, I think Nick was definitely not opposed to there being some actual checks that went out to folks because now I think this new package is not going to have those individual stimulus checks and things of that nature. Whereas Shaquille's argument was that it isn't really hitting the root cause of poverty. So I think his argument was that that money might be good as a quick solution and help people get, like you were saying, some of those meals, but it's not necessarily addressing the education issues and some of the other issues that are there as well. So I kind of saw both of their sides of their argument, but as one that is involved in the technology world, as one that is a newcomer fairly to the country, what are some of your thoughts about that as well? Do you think that there are ways that we can address some of these things in our economy?
Absolutely. I mean, again, I'm not an economist, but I can tell you a few things that probably I've understood and make sense. So, the Nobel laureate of economics last year, Abhijit Banerjee, who's an MIT professor from India, he was also asked a similar question. What do you do in a crisis like what we are today, right? How do you kind of restart the economy in some ways? And so there are two ways to do it. One is a short term, and the other is a long term, right?
Yeah.
You have to now put food into people's hands. That's the if you don't survive, there is no economy, right? As I said, if a million people have died because of COVID, those 1 million are not contributing to the economy, right? So dead people don't contribute to the economy. So first thing is to keep people up and running, right? Even from an economic point, it makes sense to have people up and running. And his argument was very simple. He said, to start with, give straight cash to the poorest of the poor.
Right.
The reason is, if you give $100 to a rich person, he's not going to need it and he's not going to spend it. Mm-hmm. Any money which is not spent is not going to help the economy. So he says, if you give it to the poor, he will spend it because he needs to spend the money to make his living. So he said, the first priority is to give money to the poorest of the poor because they're going to spend the money and that money is going to get circulated into the economy. So for me, giving tax breaks to the richest just doesn't make sense because he's going to, it's either going to reside in his bank or he's going to buy a more expensive house. Both of it doesn't necessarily translate to circulation of money as much as it is to the bottommost. When you give to the poorest of the poor, the money immediately spreads into multiple layers of the economy, right? So that's really what we need to do immediately. In the long term, I think every policy decision has to really be truly inclusive, right? If it helps only a few, I don't think that will help to reduce the massive inequality that we have today. And I'm pretty convinced inequality is the number one problem the world will go to face because inequality will lead eventually to social unrest.
Right. No, I agree. And I think we're already seeing some of that social unrest throughout the world, not just here with Black Lives Matter, but a number of other places as well. From a technology standpoint, what are you thinking are some of the things that folks should be paying attention to? And we've definitely mentioned AI, we've mentioned VR, but what are some of the things, and I'm going to ask you that same question about disability, but from a technology standpoint, what are some of the things that you think we should pay attention to over, say, the next several years while we're fighting the pandemic? But I also believe in looking forward. So what are some of the things that we should be concentrating on and paying attention to as they develop?
So it's, for me, AI is clearly one of the most powerful tools that we have. But I am not so worried about technology. Honestly, I don't think technology is going to solve the most important problems of our world. It won't. I mean, let's be very clear. I think what we are looking for is moral leadership. Right? Now, if you ask me, what got us out of the Great Depression? Well, it was a leadership from FDR and, a completely new way of rethinking our way forward. And if you look at every large crisis in the world, the thing that got us out of any crisis was moral leadership. It was not technology. Technology is just a tool. I
Yeah.
always say a tool in the hands of the fool will still remain a fool.
Right. Yeah.
You can give the most powerful tool to a fool, it doesn't make him smarter. So even though I'm a technologist, I'm saying this because I also see the limits of technology.
Right.
As I said, AI, if it's not used morally, which is what Gandhi said, you have to use whatever technology. He was not against capitalism. He was not against. He said you need to have moral leadership first.
Hmm.
And I see that today, unfortunately, we are living in times where there is a vacuum of moral leadership
Right.
across the world. And this, I'm not talking about US or any particular country. We lack moral leadership. Look at the countries that have really done well during the COVID situation, and you will see those are countries that had good moral leaders. New Zealand. I mean, I'm a huge fan of Jacinda Ardern, the Prime Minister of New Zealand. And people sometimes dismiss New Zealand. It's a small country with a few million people. How does it matter? Not true. I think she's probably by far the most amazing leader that we have in the world today. They have no problems with COVID. I mean, they seem to have handled it pretty well. They had gun violence. They seems to have handled it pretty well. So again, the other interesting facet was, they did a study and they found that the six countries that have handled COVID the best are all led by women.
Well.
It was Angela Merkel from Germany. It
Mhm.
was the Jacinda from New Zealand. It was I think it was a prime minister from Taiwan. It was a prime minister from, if I remember, it was Norway. All led by women because they lead with empathy.
Right.
They are
Yeah.
naturally wired to lead with empathy.
Yep. And that's very true. They are got geared or wired that way, whatever. And definitely empathy is something very important and something we should be doing more of. Because as you were saying that, I was thinking about one of the famous quotes. I think it might be out of Christianity and everything, but definitely it's one that we oftentimes hear ministers talking about. And it even comes back to the disability and how we're not doing enough in that. But it's that quote of what have you done for the least of us? And definitely I think that folks oftentimes hear that quote and they don't think about the fact that, that includes the disability folks that are having various disabilities as well as those that are poor, like you're talking about and everything. So what, on a disability front, what are some of the things that you think that both globally and here in the U.S. where you currently reside that we need to do on a better job, not just with autism, but with the disability community as a whole?
Again, I would say that US is, because I've studied disability across the world, right from Asia to Europe, and I would say US and UK are far ahead of everybody else in terms of policies and awareness and understanding. But again, the battle is not over yet, and I think there's still lots to be done. And I think while our education systems have been inclusive, I think our employment systems are not.
Right.
My son, for example, has access by law to a public school all the time.
Mm-hmm.
There is no exception. He has to go to a public school. No school can deny him the right to learn. But it doesn't apply to work.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't apply to employment. So most of these kids, they end up becoming adults and then sitting at home and watching television and playing video games, but that's not meaningful employment. So while we've done great progress in employment, in awareness and accessibility and education, I don't think we have done enough in employment, because employment is optimizing for profits.
Right.
It's so while we kind of live in a very socialist mind in when it comes to education, that everybody has to get education, but we don't do the same when it comes to employment. And that's why you see most people with disabilities are, in a majority, are not employed.
Yeah, because one of the things that's really shocked me, and not just here in North Carolina, but in a variety of places I've had the pleasure of visiting, is how many people that are corporations or businesses, small businesses as well as big businesses that don't have accessibility for folks that are trying to come in. And we were earlier talking about wheelchairs, but definitely there's a lot of places that don't have those accessibility points and are not even being like
Yeah,
regulated or urged to get those accessibility points.
absolutely. And so, accessibility still remains a huge challenge. And again, we have to remember that accessibility is not just physical accessibility. See, we live in a digital world today, right? And people are still figuring out, how do I make this conversation, for example, that you and me are having, Mark, accessible to a person who is deaf? Can you have sign language, for example? Can you have subtitling, which is real time? So you and me, whatever we are speaking, there is a subtitling happening real time. And so we are still figuring it out, because we are going to live more and more in a digital world. So our understanding of accessibility till now is more of physical. Okay, should we have for wheelchair bound people or wheelchair users? So we still have a lot of progress to make, because we've all gone to a digital world now.
Yeah, it's very much a digital world, and as my friend that was in filmmaking was talking about, and a couple of other folks have talked about on this platform, it's like the genie's out the bag. So I don't know that we're ever going to get it fully back in. So I think that even some of my education friends have talked about that we're going to be more in this hybrid model where part of the education might be in a physical building, but part of it is going to be doing stuff like what we're doing here at home on the computer and things of that nature. And I'm sure that as a technologist, you're seeing the same thing, that we're moving more and more into this hybrid model that's part real time, real businesses, physical businesses, but also the kind of at home businesses or the virtual businesses as well. And I don't know that we're ever going to go back to it being the old mom and pop kind of operations.
So my take here is, because I also teach at Columbia University, every quarter I go in and give my lecture in New York. My take is that what has happened, or what will eventually happen, and it's already happening, is that the traditional method of imparting knowledge is completely reversed now. So the way it used to happen in the past is, if I want to get knowledge of any kind, I need to go into a school,
Right.
into a college, and then I'm given some kind of a project or homework which I need to do at home. That's why it's called homework, right? You kind of
Right.
go to your home and finish some assignments. What you're seeing is now the exact opposite.
Right.
You can learn everything before on yourself. You can just anything on earth you want to know, you can do a YouTube and learn on your own. So what is happening now is, you can learn almost everything on your own, but you actually go to office or go to a school to do the real hands-on work.
Right. Yeah.
So you are not going to the office workplace because you want to learn something. You can already learn on it on your own, virtually. But you go to your office or to your school to really do the work with people and projects, hands-on projects. So I think that's what the first massive shift that has happened. You don't have to go anywhere to learn anymore. You can learn it on your own, but you meet people to do real projects.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. Now, one of the, I think his name was Toffler, and I know he wrote that book, Future Shock, and everything of that nature. And that was definitely a great technologist. It's one of my favorite books and everything. So
Yeah.
as we get ready to wind down over the next few minutes and everything, what are some of the things that you think, other than AI, that folks should be looking for? Because I know he had all kinds of predictions in that book, Future Wave. I said Future Shock. I think it was Future Wave, actually, about the title. But what
Yeah.
are some of the things that you are expecting folks to need to know or will be surprised that are coming down the pike from a technology standpoint, things along those lines? If I could have you have your Alpha for a moment.
Yeah, I'll again, predictions are very risky, because if they come true, then you are seen as a genius. If it's wrong, then you'll look like an idiot. So I'm very careful with my predictions. But I'll tell you a few things that I think is already happening. The first is, because we are having such a massive explosion of online content, right? I mean, everybody's doing webinars, everybody's doing calls, everybody's on a Zoom call. I think there is a massive cognitive overload of digital content. And what you would see is that digital content will kind of peak at some point, then it will flatten, and then it will go down.
Right.
Yeah. So I call it, there was a famous article written on this called the inverted pan model. So, what you have as a pan is like this, and then you have a handle, right? So it goes down, then it flattens, then it goes up, and you have a handle. So I think what we are seeing, and the reason I'm saying this is because everybody is digital today. So people often ask me, Feroze, is this forever going to increase? I say, no, this will flatten out very quickly. We will see a plateau of digital content before it also starts decreasing, and then it will kind of reach a status quo. So I think that's one thing that will happen. And what will happen is you have to curate content for attention.
Right.
So what happens is every person who's delivering content also becomes a producer of content in some ways.
Mm-hmm.
So you were speaking to filmmakers in
Right.
your previous segment. My belief is everybody will become a filmmaker.
Mm-hmm. Right. That makes sense.
Because there's no choice, right? I mean, if I want to give a 5-minute video, honestly, if you look at my room, now I have a tripod. It's like actually having my own small studio in my office. So this is, if you can see, this is my office with a lot of books, but it has a tripod, it has a blah, blah, blah. So what has happened is everybody has become a producer now of good content, because you can't just throw content out people, because you also have to curate it to have people's attention. So I think that's something that will happen for sure, and if not, it's already happening. The other thing is, Fareed Zakaria wrote this book called 10 Lessons for a Post-Pandemic World. I would highly recommend people to read that book, because he's really looked at the overall geopolitical scenario, and he's of course said that there will be massive inequalities and so on. But I think there are two things we should be very careful about, that like technology, globalization cannot be reversed. Right? I mean, people think, oh, let's now close our boundaries and we will be fully independent. I don't think that's possible. So globalization is here to stay. But really what I feel what we need in today's times, Marc, is we need more idealists. And not a lot of people, and I always think myself as an idealist, but people say, no, if you want to survive, you have to be a much more a practical realist, right? And my take is only an idealist over time becomes a realist. A realist never becomes an idealist.
Right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I can definitely see what you're saying about that, and I agree. I consider myself an idealist as well. And like I said, I think we got just about 5 more minutes before I have to wrap up everything. So I had 2 very quick questions. One that was a kind of a fun question, and the other one that's a more serious kind of wrap-up question. But the fun question is, I've been noticing that there's this great picture of this person behind you. It's some sort of lady and everything. So I'm curious as to who that picture is and who that person represents in your life, because there was that picture of everything. So I'm thinking it's somebody important in your life. So definitely I would love you to share with our audience who that is.
I'll show you. There are 2 people here whom I greatly admire. This one is Temple Grandin, the lady. There's a HBO movie made on her life. She's probably the most famous autistic person, and she's a very dear friend. So she had come home. So that's Temple Grandin. That's signed by her. And the other one is the first Nobel laureate from Asia. His name is Rabindranath Tagore. He's from the same place as I am, and I'm a huge fan of his writings. Tagore is probably one of the great poets of the world. And maybe I'll show you this. There is one more here. That one is India's most famous cricketer. His name is Sachin Tendulkar. So that's one of his T-shirts. So those are the 3 people whom I absolutely admire.
Sounds great. And definitely it sounds like one of them that they are all coming from different aspects of society. So you've got a sports person, you've got somebody that's in your community that you've got your passion project about with this young lady that's involved in disability, and then you've got the Nobel Peace Laureate. So definitely it seems like you've got all of those aspects covered in everything. So I said one, and we're going to actually throw one other sports question at you, which is there a favorite cricket team that you've got? Because I know one of my producers, who is Ankit, is also big into cricket and is actually working out of New Delhi. So is there a favorite cricket team that you root for? Because I'm sure he wouldn't get mad at me if I didn't ask you at least that.
I think, obviously I support the Indian cricket team because that's the national team. But at a club level, just like how you have, the Chicago Bulls for Chicago and others. India also have all these city cricket teams, like the Mumbai Indians and the Kolkata Knight Riders and Chennai and so on. But yeah, I mean, I've lived across the country, but my favorite cricket team is still Mumbai Indians, because that's where my Sachin Tendulkar, whose T-shirt I just showed behind me, he used to play for that team. So I'm kind of still rooting for the Mumbai cricket team.
All right. Well, I'll be sure to let him know that. I think we're supposed to have a meeting tomorrow about some stuff around the International Broadcast Media Network. And the thing that I do with every guest when I can, unfortunately, my friend Ronnie, the filmmaker, got off before I could have him do this. But I try to have every guest give like their words of encouragement, their words of positivity that they would like to share with our global audience. So this is your opportunity to do that. And you've got a few minutes to do it. But any words of encouragement that you would like to share with our global audiences, and I'm sure that they would love to hear that.
Thank you. I mean, I've lived my life on a very simple philosophy that accept what you cannot change, but change what you cannot accept. Right. So, whatever work that I've done, whether it's in the disability space or in literature or other areas, sometimes you've dealt with a certain few cards and you can't change that, right? You can't choose your parents, you can't choose your boss, you can't choose certain things, you can't choose some of the things that you dealt with in life, and so you have to accept it. And acceptance is a very important stage, but always remember that change the things that you cannot accept.
Yeah, that makes sense.
If you think something is wrong, don't just sit and complain. I mean, I don't have much respect for armchair thinkers, and I'm like, if you don't like something, what have you done to change it? So change, or at least make an attempt to change something that is not right.
Yep, that makes sense. And I agree with you that you have to be the change that you want to be, which is what some feminist people have said and everything, that you have to be that change that you want to be. And I definitely believe in kind of what John Lewis talked about of causing that good trouble. And it sounds like you've been doing that for a number of years, causing that kind of good trouble and all of that. I said that was the last question. I lied to guess, but I promise it's the last one, which is, who are some of the folks that you admire and things along that line? And then that will wrap everything up for this particular edition of Mullings Music and Memories. But I'm sure folks would love to know who some of the people that you admire out there in the world of anything, whether it's the world of sports, whether it's the world of entertainment, whether it's the world of politics, but just some of the folks that you admire in your life.
So I've as I said, I've spent decades studying Gandhi, and he's been kind of my benchmark in terms of moral leadership. So I have a great admiration for him, but I've also have great admiration for MLK, who was also greatly inspired by Gandhi, and Lincoln. But in the current times, I've been a huge fan of Obama. I don't think sometimes he gets the credit for a lot of things he's done. People seem to think that he was maybe weak on some policies and so on. But I'm just now reading the latest book of Promised Land, and it's fascinating to see, what he went through. So I have great admiration for Obama right now, and this has nothing to do with whether I'm a Democrat or a Republican. As I said, I'm neither, or I'm both. But I think he has demonstrated a great moral leadership. Also, as I said, Jacinda Ardern, who is a great moral leadership. And in the technology world, Satya Nadella, for the way he's turned around Microsoft. And again, he's one of those leaders who turned it around by leading with empathy. One of those very few corporate leaders who I always say, who's kept empathy at the core and ambition at the edge. Yep. If you make ambition at the core and empathy at the edge, you can sometimes create negative consequences. If you're too ambitious, you may end up doing the wrong things to get to your ambition. So leading with empathy is so important. And I found these two, Satya Nadella and Jacinda Ardern, as one from the corporate world, one from the field of politics, who really led with empathy.
Yep, and I think leading with empathy is very important. And speaking of leading with empathy, I'm going to actually go out with, we always go out with the Ankit, that's the gentleman from India's daughter, and some of the things that she does in terms of giving us encouragement, in terms of like hand washing and things of that nature. But we also have a program about, like I said, the woman that does it around cerebral palsy and things of that nature. So I'm actually going to play her spot first, then I'll go get the one about our guy, the producer, and his show that is daughter did and everything. But right now, this is Wynn Charles and the show that she does for us. So definitely, if you get a chance, she's an amazing podcaster and works within cerebral palsy to still be an encourager of both disability and women in general. So this is a little bit about her show. So that's one of those amazing shows that we're doing here on the International Broadcast Media Network. And like I said, that's the show that she does and everything along those lines. So I think that you will definitely be enjoying that, and definitely, hopefully, we'll get a chance to hopefully even have you appear on her show. I think we've moved the time and everything, but she's still doing it here on our platform. So definitely, I hope that you'll get a chance to come on. And I'd love to have you come back on in another edition of this show at some point, Mr. Ferose and everything. So do know that I might invite you back, and hopefully you can come back and join us. But this is all about Ankit and his daughter and her encouraging us of things that we should be doing during this time of the pandemic.
Coronavirus से कैसे बचेंगे? Okay, hand होकर और ऐसे अपने खांसी जब आएगी तो ऐसे करेंगे अच्छू अच्छू और कोरोना वायरस को धन्यवाद हमारा म्यूजिक सुनने का.
Beautiful.
Yep, very beautiful and everything. So appreciate you being on, and that's going to wrap up another edition of Mullings Music and Memories. Believe it or not, Mr. Ferose, I've still got to do a third podcast because Monday is my crazy podcasting day. So that's only audio, so I don't have to deal with all this technology stuff. I just have to deal with my phone. So it's a little bit different, but I'm here to jump on that one, and then I'll be done for the day. But I do appreciate you being on. Glad that I was able to meet you through Shri, and hopefully I can get you to come back on some future episodes as well.
Thank you so much. All the best, Marc. Take care.
Thank you.